Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The Sonoran Desert knows how to play tricks on the mind, especially during long, solitary patrols. When all you hear is the echo of your boots hitting the hard ground and the distant cry of a hawk, your mind starts to show you things that aren't there. My name is Agent Barnabas Thorne. I've been working the Arizona-Mexico border for 12 years. In that time, I've witnessed things most people couldn't bear. Corpses drying under the scorching sun, miles of drug tunnels, and people driven to horrific acts by desperation. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I saw that late July afternoon. It was around 3 in the afternoon. The heat was unbearable, the thermometer easily hitting 46 degrees. The air shimmered like a water curtain on the horizon. While patrolling a dirt road 11 kilometers off the nearest highway, a road hardly anyone used, something caught my eye. In the middle of the desert, there was a baby stroller, standing alone, but it wasn't an ordinary stroller. It was an expensive model designed for running, with cup holders, a sunshade, and thick rubber wheels. Its navy blue body gleamed with silver details, and from inside my air-conditioned vehicle it looked almost brand new. The sunshade was completely closed, making it impossible to see inside. Without knowing what it held, I felt an indescribable chill in that moment. I picked up the radio and reported my location to headquarters. 7-4 to headquarters. I found an abandoned baby carriage at the 17th mile marker on Old Cottonwood Trail. The situation looks unusual. There was a moment of static. Then my supervisor, Mordecai Ashford's voice came over the speaker. "Copy that, 7-4. Any footprints in the vicinity?" I carefully scanned the area around my vehicle. The desert terrain was a mix of hardened soil and loose sand. It was almost perfect for tracking. But there was nothing there, no footprints, no tire tracks except mine. Not even the surrounding vegetation had been disturbed. The stroller looked as if it had fallen from the sky. "Nothing found, sir." Not the slightest sign of foot traffic. There was a brief silence before a reply came. Then Ashford spoke. "Be careful, 7-4. It could be a trap." That was exactly what I was thinking. I knew the cartel set traps like this to lure patrol agents into vulnerable positions. But this time, something was different. I could feel it. Something was wrong. Something I couldn't put into words. I raised my binoculars and looked closer at the stroller. There was a diaper bag hanging from the handle. A bottle wedged into the cup holder caught my attention. A baby bottle. It still had milk in it. What's more, it hadn't spoiled in the heat. It was still white and fresh. "I'm going to investigate," I said into the radio. "Request backup at my location." "Agent Isadora Grimm is 20 minutes out," Ashford replied. "Wait for backup, Thorne." But I couldn't. Something was pulling me toward that stroller, a feeling in my gut that every second mattered. I checked my sidearm, grabbed my rifle from the mount, and stepped out into the oppressive heat. The walk to the stroller was maybe 50 yards, but it felt like a mile. The desert was absolutely silent. No insects, no birds, not even the usual rustle of lizards in the brush. My boots made soft crunching sounds on the ground, and I found myself holding my breath as I approached. When I was 10 feet away, I called out, "Border Patrol, is anyone there?" Silence. I moved closer, rifle at the ready, and used the barrel to slowly push back the sunshade. The stroller was empty, but that wasn't the strangest part. Inside the seat was a baby blanket, soft pink with little elephants on it, and it was warm to the touch. Not desert warm from sitting in the sun, but body warm, as if a baby had been lying on it moments before. There was also a pacifier, and when I picked it up with my gloved hand, it was wet with saliva. Fresh saliva. My heart was pounding now. I spun in a full circle, scanning the desert in every direction. Nothing but saguaro cacti, creosote bushes, and endless stretches of sand and rock. The nearest cover where someone could hide was a rock formation at least 300 yards away. Ashford, the stroller's empty, but there's evidence of recent occupation. Very recent. Within minutes. Get back to your vehicle, Thorne. Now. But I was already examining the ground around the stroller more carefully. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In a perfect circle around the stroller, about 3 feet in radius, the sand was completely smooth. Not wind smooth, but deliberately smoothed, as if someone had taken a rake or a branch and carefully erased any tracks. But beyond that circle, there were no footprints leading in or out. It was impossible. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully examined the diaper bag. Inside were fresh diapers, sealed bottles of water, formula powder, baby wipes, and something that made me pause. A handwritten note. The paper was crisp and new, not weathered by the desert conditions. In neat, careful handwriting it said, "She doesn't belong here." She never did. I was about to radio this in when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a baby crying. But it wasn't coming from any particular direction. It seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, echoing off invisible walls in the open desert. The crying was desperate, frightened, the way babies cry when they're in pain or terrified. "Do you hear that?" I said into my radio, but all I got back was static. I tried again. "Base, this is 7-4, do you copy?" Nothing. My radio was completely dead. The crying intensified, and now it seemed to be moving, circling around me like some invisible carousel of sound. I turned in circles trying to track it, but it was impossible. The sun beat down mercilessly, and I was starting to feel dizzy. Sweat poured down my face, stinging my eyes. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the crying stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard something else. Footsteps. Soft, careful footsteps in the sand, moving toward me. But when I looked, there was no one there. The footsteps continued, getting closer, and I could see the sand being disturbed, little puffs of dust rising with each invisible step. I raised my rifle. "Federal agent, show yourself!" The footsteps stopped about 10 feet away. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I watched in horror as fresh footprints appeared in the sand, one after another, leading from where the invisible presence had stopped directly to the stroller. Adult-sized footprints, bare feet from the look of them, with unusually long toes. My hands were shaking as I watched the stroller rock gently, as if someone was leaning over it, checking on an invisible baby. The bottle of formula lifted out of the cup holder by itself, hovering in midair for a moment before being placed back. Every instinct told me to run, but I was frozen in place, my mind trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. Then I heard a voice, barely a whisper, seeming to come from right next to my ear even though no one was there. "Stop looking for us." I spun around, rifle ready, but there was nothing. When I turned back to the stroller, it was gone. Not moved, not hidden, simply gone, as if it had never been there at all. The only evidence it had existed was the circle of smoothed sand in my own photographs. My radio suddenly crackled back to life. 7-4, this is Grim. I'm at your location, but I don't see you. Where are you? I looked around, disoriented. My patrol vehicle was right where I'd left it, and I could see Agent Isadora Grimm's vehicle pulling up beside it. But when I looked at my GPS, it showed I was standing exactly where I'd started, next to my vehicle. The 50 yards I'd walked to reached the stroller. It was as if it had never happened. I'm right here, I said, stumbling toward the vehicles. Grimm got out, her red hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression concerned. Thorne, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I wanted to tell her everything, but how could I explain what I'd just experienced? She'd think I'd had heat stroke, hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe I had, but when I checked my phone, the photographs were there. The stroller, the baby blanket, the note. We need to search this area, I said. There's something out here, someone with a baby. We spent the next 3 hours combing the desert in a half-mile radius. We found nothing. No stroller, no footprints, no evidence anyone had been there at all. But as the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of orange and red, Grimm found something that made both of us stop cold. Partially buried in the sand, wrapped in plastic to protect it from the elements, was a birth certificate. The name on it was Maria Santos, born July 15, 2023, just 2 weeks ago. The mother's name was listed as Carmen Santos, age 19. The father's name was blank. This is fresh, Grimm said, examining the document. The seal is authentic. This is a real birth certificate. We ran the names through our database when we got back to base. Carmen Santos had been reported missing from Phoenix 3 weeks ago. She'd been 8 months pregnant at the time. No one had seen her since, and her family was desperate for answers. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that voice, those invisible footsteps, the crying that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I pulled up the photos on my phone again, studying every detail. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. In the last photo I'd taken, the one of the smoothed circle of sand, there was something in the background I hadn't seen with my naked eye. It was faint, barely visible, but it was there, the outline of a woman standing about 20 feet away, holding something in her arms. She was transparent, like a double exposure in an old photograph, but I could make out her features. Young, Hispanic, matching the description of Carmen Santos. But her eyes were solid black, and she was looking directly at the camera, directly at me. I showed the photo to Supervisor Ashford the next morning. He studied it for a long time, his weathered face unreadable. Finally, he looked up at me. Thorne, I've been working this border for 30 years. I've seen things out in that desert that don't make it into official reports. Things that can't be explained. This isn't the first time someone's reported something like this. He pulled out a file from his desk drawer, thick with incident reports dating back decades. Always the same area, always involving children or pregnant women who've gone missing. The locals have a name for it. La Cuna Vacía, the empty cradle. What happens to them? I asked. The missing women and children? Ashford shook his head. We don't know. Sometimes bodies are found, sometimes they're not. But the ones that are found... He paused, choosing his words carefully. They're always found in places they couldn't have gotten to on their own. Caves with no entrances, locked rooms in abandoned buildings, buried in sand with no disturbance to the surface. So, what do? We document it, we search when we can, and we hope that whatever's out there is satisfied with taking only those who come to it willingly. Carmen Santos didn't come willingly. She was running from something. Ashford looked at me with tired eyes. How do you know she was running from something in our world, Thorne? Maybe she was running to something in another. The days following my encounter with the abandoned stroller blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and obsessive research. I couldn't shake the feeling that Carmen Santos was still out there, somewhere, needing help. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those solid black eyes staring at me from the photograph, and heard that whispered warning, "Stop looking for us." But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't. It was on the fourth night that things took a darker turn. I was alone in my small apartment in Tucson, poring over missing persons reports from the past decade when my phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown, but that wasn't unusual in my line of work. "Agent Thorne," I answered. For a moment, there was only breathing on the other end. Then, a woman's voice, speaking Spanish with a trembling urgency. "You saw her. You saw my Carmen." My heart skipped. "Who is this?" "Rosa Santos, Carmen's mother. Please, you have to tell me, is she alive?" I hesitated. How could I explain what I'd seen? "Mrs. Santos, I found evidence that Carmen had been in the area, but—" "The stroller," she interrupted. "You found the stroller." "I know because I bought it for her. Navy blue with silver, the expensive one she wanted so badly for the baby." My blood ran cold. I hadn't mentioned the stroller in any official report. Ashford had made sure of that. "How did you know about—" "She came to me in a dream," Rosa said, her voice breaking. "She was standing in the desert, holding little Maria, and she told me a Border Patrol agent had found her stroller. She said you were the only one who could help them." I gripped the phone tighter. "Mrs. Santos, where are you calling from?" "Phoenix, but I'm driving down tonight. I need to go to where you found it. I need to find my daughter." "No," I said firmly. "Mrs. Santos, that area isn't safe. Let us handle—" The line went dead. I immediately called Ashford, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Same with Grimm's. I tried dispatch, but the night operator said both of them had left hours ago on a priority call and hadn't checked in since. That wasn't like either of them. I knew I should wait until morning, follow protocol. But something told me Rosa Santos would be heading into that desert tonight with or without my help. And if what I'd experienced was real, she wouldn't come back out. I grabbed my gear and headed for Old Cottonwood Trail. The desert at night is a different creature entirely from its daytime counterpart. The scorching heat gives way to a bone-deep chill, and shadows dance in ways that make you question what's real and what's paranoia. My patrol vehicle's headlights cut through the darkness as I drove, but they only seemed to make the surrounding blackness more oppressive. I reached mile marker 17 at just past midnight. My headlights swept across the area where I'd found the stroller, and my heart nearly stopped. There was a car parked there, a beat-up Honda Civic with Arizona plates. The driver's door was open, interior light on, but nobody was inside. I called it in, but my radio gave me nothing but static, just like before. My cell phone showed no signal, even though I should have had at least 2 bars in this area. I grabbed my flashlight and rifle and stepped out into the cold night air. "Mrs. Santos?" I called out. "Rosa Santos?" "This is Agent Thorne with Border Patrol." The desert answered with silence. I approached the Honda and looked inside. A purse was on the passenger seat, wallet still inside with Rosa Santos's driver's license. The keys were still in the ignition. Engine off, but electricals on, slowly draining the battery. On the dashboard was a photograph. Carmen Santos, young and smiling, obviously pregnant, standing next to an older woman who had to be Rosa. But there was something wrong with the photo. Carmen's eyes, which should have been brown according to her missing persons file, were solid black in the picture, just like in my photograph from 4 days ago. A sound made me spin around. Footsteps in the sand, multiple sets, moving in a pattern that made no sense. They seemed to be walking in circles, sometimes overlapping, sometimes diverging. I followed my flashlight beam but saw no one making them. Then I heard Rosa's voice, distant and echoing. "Carmen! Mija, where are you?" "Mrs. Santos," I shouted, moving toward the voice. "Stay where you are. I'm coming to you." But her voice kept moving, leading me deeper into the desert. I followed for what felt like miles, but according to my GPS was only about 100 yards. The landscape looked different from what I remembered. Rock formations that shouldn't have been there, cacti in impossible arrangements, and always those footsteps surrounding me, pacing me. I crested a small rise and stopped dead. Below me, in a depression that definitely hadn't been there 4 days ago, was a structure. It looked like a small adobe house, ancient and crumbling, but with lights flickering in the windows. Candlelight, from the look of it. Standing in front of the house was Rosa Santos. She was facing away from me, completely still, staring at the door. "Mrs. Santos," I called out, starting down the slope. "We need to leave, now." She didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge she'd heard me. As I got closer, I realized she was speaking, but not to me. She was having a conversation with someone I couldn't see. "Yes, I understand," she was saying, "but she's my daughter. I have the right to see her." Pause. "No, I won't interfere. I just want to know she's safe." Another pause. "What do you mean she chose this?" She was running from her boyfriend. He was abusive. She was scared. I reached out to touch her shoulder and my hand passed right through her. I jerked back, stumbling. Rosa Santos was there, but not there, translucent like a projection. But I could see her breath misting in the cold air. Could see her tears reflecting the candlelight from the windows. The door to the adobe house creaked open. A woman stepped out, and I knew immediately it was Carmen Santos. But she was different from her photos. Her skin had a grayish pallor, like she'd been dusted with ash. Her black eyes were infinite, like looking into deep caves. She was wearing a simple white dress that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. In her arms was a bundle of blankets. "Mama," Carmen said, and her voice was like wind through dry leaves. "You shouldn't have come." "Carmen!" Rosa tried to run to her daughter but hit an invisible barrier, pressing against it like glass. "What happened to you? What is this place?" "It's sanctuary," Carmen replied. "They offered us sanctuary. Who? Who are they?" Carmen tilted her head, and I saw something move behind her in the doorway. Shadows that weren't quite shadows, shapes that hurt to look at directly. "The old ones," Carmen said. "The ones who were here before. Before the border, before the fences, before the names we gave to everything. They still remember when this was all one place, one people." "Carmen, please," Rosa sobbed. "Come home. Bring Maria home." "Maria belongs here now," Carmen said, looking down at the bundle in her arms. "She's special, Mama. She can move between worlds. That's why they chose us. That's why they saved us from him." I found my voice. "Carmen, your family is worried sick. Whatever you think is happening here, we can help you. There are shelters, protection programs." Carmen's black eyes turned to me, and I felt my blood freeze in my veins. "Agent Thorne, you were warned to stop looking. I'm trying to help you." "Help?" She laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. "Where was help when Jason was beating me? Where was help when I ran with nothing but the clothes on my back, 9 months pregnant, bleeding from where he cut me? I prayed for help, and help came. Just not the kind you understand." The bundle in her arms moved, and a small hand emerged from the blankets. But it wasn't a normal baby's hand. It was translucent, shifting between solid and ethereal, and it had too many fingers. 7, maybe 8, all of them too long. They made a deal with me, Carmen continued. Sanctuary for service. Maria will grow up between worlds, a bridge between what was and what is. And in exchange, we help them reclaim what was taken. Reclaim what? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Everything, Carmen said simply. One child at a time, one family at a time, until the border doesn't exist anymore, until the old ways return. Rosa was crying harder now. Carmen, this isn't you. This isn't my daughter talking. No, Carmen agreed. Your daughter died in the desert, Mama. Bled out from a stab wound, alone and afraid, calling for help that never came. They found her body and offered her a choice, true death or this. I chose this. For Maria, for all the Marias who will come after. The shapes in the doorway behind Carmen became more distinct. They were tall, impossibly thin, with elongated limbs and faces that seemed to shift and change every time I tried to focus on them. Their eyes, dozens of them, all solid black like Carmen's. One of them spoke, though its mouth didn't move. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating in my bones. The agent has seen too much. He must choose. Choose what? I asked, my hand instinctively going to my weapon, though I knew it would be useless here. Forget, or remember, safety in ignorance, or truth in madness. There's a third option, another voice said from behind me. I spun around to see Supervisor Ashford and Agent Grimm standing at the top of the rise, but like Rosa, they were translucent, not entirely there. Ashford? I called out. Grimm? What's happening? We're in between, Thorne, Grimm said, her voice echoing strangely. Same as you. This place exists in the spaces between what's real and what's possible. We followed Rosa Santos here, but we're not fully here, neither are you. I looked down at my hands and gasped. They were see-through, fading in and out like a bad television signal. The old ones have been here longer than human memory, Ashford explained. Every culture that's lived in this desert has stories about them. The Tohono O'odham called them the Shadow People. The Apache called them the Hungry Ghosts. They feed on desperation, on those who have nowhere else to turn. But they also protect, Carmen interjected. They saved me. They saved Maria. Did they? Grimm asked. Or did they just trade one prison for another? Carmen's expression flickered, and for a moment I saw fear in those black eyes. It was my choice. Was it really? Grimm pressed. When you're dying in the desert, is any choice really free? The tall shapes behind Carmen moved forward, surrounding her protectively, or possessively. It was hard to tell. The one who had spoken before addressed us again. You have seen the truth. Now you must decide. Will you report this? Will you send others to find us? Or will you understand that some borders are not meant to be crossed, some mysteries not meant to be solved? What about the others? I asked. The other missing women and children? They are cared for, the entity said. They exist between, as Carmen does, as the child does. They are neither alive nor dead, neither here nor there. They are safe from the violence of your world, even if they are lost to it. That's not good enough, I said. Their families deserve to know. Their families deserve peace, the entity interrupted. Which would you give them? The comfort of not knowing, or the madness of the truth? I thought about Rosa Santos, still pressed against that invisible barrier, reaching for a daughter she could see but never touch again. I thought about all the missing persons files, all the families waiting for news that would never come. There has to be another way, I said. There is, Carmen said suddenly. Let me send messages. Let me tell them we're safe, even if we can't come back. Let them have closure." The entities behind her writhed in apparent disagreement, but Carmen stood firm. "That was not part of our deal, but I'm making it part now. You need us to bridge the worlds? Then let us bridge them with mercy, not mystery." For a long moment, the desert was silent except for Rosa's quiet sobbing. Then the lead entity spoke. "Acceptable. But the messages will come in dreams, in signs. Nothing that your world would call proof." "That's all we need," Carmen said, looking at her mother. "Just enough to let them know we're okay." She walked to the barrier, separating her from Rosa, pressing her hand against it. Rosa did the same, their palms almost touching through the invisible wall. "I love you, Mama," Carmen said. "Tell Papa I'm sorry. Tell him I'm safe now." "Carmen," Rosa whispered. "My baby." "I'm not your baby anymore," Carmen said sadly. "But Maria will know about you. About all of you. She'll grow up knowing she had a family who loved her, even if she can't be with them." The bundle in her arms gurgled, a sound that was almost normal, almost human. For a moment, the baby's hand became solid, reaching through the barrier. Rosa touched it, just for a second, before it faded back to translucence. "You must go now," the entity said. "Dawn approaches and the between spaces close with the light. Remember what you have seen, or forget, but do not return. Next time, you may not have the choice to leave." The adobe house began to fade, becoming transparent like everything else. Carmen walked backward toward it, still holding Maria, still maintaining eye contact with her mother. "Goodbye, Mama," she said. "Look for me in your dreams." And then she was gone. The house was gone. The entities were gone. Rosa Santos collapsed in the sand, fully solid now, sobbing uncontrollably. I ran to her, suddenly corporeal myself, my hands real and substantial again. Grimm and Ashford were there too, helping me get Rosa to her feet. "We need to get out of here," Ashford said urgently, "before the sun rises, before they change their minds." We half carried Rosa back to her car. I drove it while Grimm drove my patrol vehicle and Ashford took his own. We didn't stop until we reached the highway, until we were back in the world of concrete and steel and things that made sense. At the station, we sat Rosa down with a cup of coffee and tried to explain what couldn't be explained. She didn't say much, just held the coffee cup and stared at nothing. Finally, she looked up at me. "Will I really dream of her?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I hope so." She nodded, gathered her things, and left. We never filed an official report. What would we even say? Ashford locked away my photos and my notes in the same file with all the other impossible things that had happened in that stretch of desert over the years. But I couldn't let it go entirely. I started visiting Rosa Santos every few weeks just to check in. And she did dream of Carmen. She dreamed of her daughter happy, holding Maria, living in a place of eternal twilight where the old rules didn't apply. She even started getting letters, appearing on her doorstep with no postmark, no delivery. Simple messages. "We're safe. We love you. We remember." Other families of missing persons in that area started reporting similar experiences. Dreams, signs, messages that couldn't possibly be real, but brought comfort nonetheless. The disappearances didn't stop, but they changed. Now they only took those who truly had nowhere else to go, those who were running from something worse than the unknown. 3 months passed after the incident with Rosa Santos. 3 months of routine patrols, standard arrests, and normal reports that I could file without questioning my sanity. I tried to convince myself that what I'd experienced was some kind of heat-induced hallucination, a desert mirage taken to the extreme. but the dreams wouldn't let me forget. Every night I dreamed of that adobe house, of Carmen's black eyes, of the baby with too many fingers. Sometimes I heard the crying again, that omnipresent sound that came from everywhere and nowhere. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, checking my phone for photos that I'd already transferred to Ashford's locked files. It was Agent Isadora Grimm who finally broke the silence about what we'd experienced. She came to my apartment one evening in October, looking haggard. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her usually immaculate red hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. "They're increasing," she said, without preamble, when I opened the door. "The disappearances. Ashford doesn't want to acknowledge it, but I've been tracking them." I let her in, poured us both coffee, and listened as she laid out her findings. In the 3 months since our encounter, there had been 17 disappearances along our sector of the border. All women with children or pregnant women. All in desperate situations, fleeing abuse, poverty, or worse. And all leaving behind those same strange signs. Abandoned strollers, baby supplies arranged in impossible patterns, smooth circles in the sand with no tracks leading in or out. "But that's not the worst part," Grimm said, pulling out a folder of photographs. "Look at these." The photos were from various crime scenes across Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Bodies of men, all with histories of domestic violence, all found dead in circumstances that defied explanation. One was found in a locked room with no windows, his body contorted in an impossible position. Another was discovered buried in sand in the middle of a parking lot, with no disturbance to the asphalt above him. A third was found inside a wall that had been solid concrete since the building's construction 50 years ago. "Look at their eyes," Grimm said. I looked closer. Each corpse's eyes had been turned solid black, just like Carmen's. "These are the men they were running from," I said. It wasn't a question. Grimm nodded, every one of them. The abusive boyfriends, husbands, traffickers, all dead within days of their victims' disappearances. "The old ones are protecting them," I said. "Or Carmen is, or both." "It's justice," Grimm said. But she didn't sound convinced. "Isn't it? These men were monsters." "Maybe. But what happens when they run out of monsters to punish? What happens when they decide the whole system is guilty?" Before Grimm could answer, my phone rang. It was Ashford. "Thorne, Grimm, I know she's there with you. I need you both at mile marker 17, now." "Sir?" I asked. "There's been another one. But this time it's different. The subject is still there." We drove in tense silence, both patrol vehicles racing through the dark desert night. As we approached mile marker 17, we could see the flashing lights of multiple Border Patrol vehicles, an ambulance, and surprisingly several black SUVs that screamed federal government. Ashford met us at the perimeter they'd established. "Homeland Security is here," he said quietly. "This has gone above our heads now. But they want you two to approach first, since you've had contact before." "Contact with what?" I asked. "See for yourself." We walked past the barrier of vehicles, and there, in the exact spot where I'd first found the stroller, was a young woman. She was sitting cross-legged in the sand, cradling something in her arms, rocking back and forth. As we got closer, I could see it was a baby, a normal, human baby from what I could tell. The woman looked up at us as we approached, and I recognized her from the missing persons files. Lucia Vega, age 22, reported missing from El Paso 2 weeks ago along with her 6-month-old son. She'd been fleeing from her boyfriend, who'd threatened to kill them both. But Lucia's eyes weren't black. They were normal, brown, filled with tears and confusion. "I don't understand," she said as we knelt beside her. They brought me back. They said I couldn't stay. Who brought you back? Grim asked gently. The shadow women. Carmen and the others. They said I didn't belong with them. Why? I asked. What was different about you? Lucia looked down at her baby, who was sleeping peacefully. They said Diego wasn't chosen. He doesn't have the gift. He can't move between worlds. She looked back up at us. They said I had to make a choice. Stay without him, or return to danger with him. So you chose to come back, Grim said. Of course I did. He's my son. Lucia's voice broke. But now Ricardo will find us. He'll kill us both. No, I said firmly. He won't. I stood and walked back to where Ashford was standing with the Homeland Security agents. She needs protection. Witness protection, asylum, something. The boyfriend she's running from. Ricardo Vega, one of the agents interrupted. He was tall, gray-haired, with the kind of expressionless face that comes from seeing too much. He was found dead this morning in El Paso, apparent heart attack, though the autopsy showed irregularities. Black eyes? I asked. The agent's expression finally changed, showing surprise. How did you know? Lucky guess. The agent studied me for a moment. Agent Thorne, I'm Special Agent Harrison with Homeland Security's Paranormal Division. Paranormal Division? Grim had walked up beside me. That's a thing. Unofficially, Harrison said. We investigate incidents that fall outside normal parameters. Your reports, sealed though they were, flagged our system. We've been monitoring this area for 3 months. And? Ashford asked. And we've recorded energy signatures unlike anything we've seen before. Electromagnetic anomalies, temporal distortions, matter displacement that shouldn't be possible. Whatever's happening here, it's real, and it's growing stronger. So, what do you want from us? I asked. Information, cooperation, and most importantly, contact. Contact? Harrison nodded toward Lucia. She's been there. She's seen them. We need to know everything she knows. She's traumatized, Grim protested. She needs medical attention, not an interrogation. She'll get both, Harrison assured us. But time is a factor. The energy readings are spiking. Something big is about to happen. As if in response to his words, the ground beneath our feet began to vibrate. Not like an earthquake, but like a tuning fork being struck. The sound was felt more than heard, resonating in our bones. Then the sky above mile marker 17 began to shimmer, like heat waves but in the cold night air. The stars seemed to bend and distort, and for a moment I could see through to something else. Another sky with different stars, where things that weren't quite clouds moved in patterns that hurt to follow. "Everyone back!" Harrison shouted, but it was too late. The shimmer exploded outward, washing over us like a wave of static electricity. Every hair on my body stood on end, and for a moment I could see everything. Every between space, every shadow world, every possible reality layered on top of each other like transparent photographs. And in all of them, I saw Carmen. She was standing in the center of the distortion, but she wasn't alone. There were dozens of women with her, all with black eyes, all carrying children or holding the hands of toddlers. They stood in formation like an army, and behind them were the tall, shifting forms of the old ones. Agent Thorne, Carmen's voice echoed across all realities simultaneously. We need to talk. Carmen, I said, stepping forward despite Harrison's protests. What is this? What are you doing? Opening doors, she replied. The first of many. The old ones kept their bargain with us. Now we keep ours with them. Which is? To reclaim, to restore, to remember. She gestured to the women around her. We are the forgotten, the abused, the discarded. We found sanctuary in the between spaces, but sanctuary isn't enough anymore. We want justice. You're already getting justice, I said. The men who hurt you are just symptoms, Carmen interrupted. The system that allowed them to hurt us, that failed to protect us, that treats us as less than human because of where we were born or what language we speak. That system needs to change. And you're going to change it by, what, invading? Carmen smiled, and it was both sad and terrifying. Not invading, returning. This land was ours before it was yours. The old ones remember when there were no borders, no walls, no papers deciding who belongs and who doesn't. We're going to remind everyone else. The distortion pulsed, and suddenly there were more figures visible. Not just women and children, but entire families, communities, all standing in the between spaces, waiting. How many? Grimm asked, her voice barely a whisper. Thousands, Carmen replied. Every person who died crossing, who disappeared in the desert, who was turned away and perished. They've all been waiting in the between spaces, neither alive nor dead, for this moment. This is impossible, Harrison said, but his instruments were going crazy, confirming that something very possible was happening. The barrier is weakening, one of the old ones spoke, its voice like wind through a cave. Between your world and ours, between what is and what was. Soon there will be no separation. When? I asked. Soon. Days, perhaps weeks. The child Maria grows stronger, and with her growth the doors open wider. She is the bridge, the first of many who will walk freely between worlds. I thought of that baby with too many fingers, growing up in a reality that wasn't quite real, being shaped into something humanity had no words for. There has to be another way, I said. This isn't justice, it's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing, Carmen said, but you're right. There is another way. She looked directly at me. You could help us. Help you how? Be our voice in your world. Tell them we're coming. Not as conquerors, but as reminders. Reminders that this land has always belonged to those who need it most. That borders drawn in blood can be erased with mercy. That the forgotten don't stay forgotten forever. They won't listen, Harrison said. The government, the military. They'll see this as a threat. They'll respond with force. Carmen's expression grew sad. Then many will die. On both sides, but the outcome will be the same. The old ones have waited too long to be denied now. The distortion began to fade, the overlapping realities separating back into their discrete dimensions. But before Carmen disappeared entirely, she spoke one more time. You have a choice to make, all of you. Stand with the forgotten, or stand against them. But know this, we remember everyone who helped us, and everyone who hurt us. And soon we'll have the power to reward or punish as we see fit. Then they were gone. The desert returned to normal, or as normal as it ever was. The only evidence of what had happened was our instruments, all showing readings that shouldn't exist, and Lucia Vega still sitting in the sand with her baby, tears streaming down her face. They didn't want us, she whispered. We weren't special enough for their new world. Or maybe, I thought, you were the lucky ones. Harrison was already on his phone, calling in reports, requesting backup, probably alerting every acronym in Washington. Grimm was helping Lucia to the ambulance. Ashford was staring at the spot where the distortion had been, his weathered face unreadable. I walked over to him. What do we do now? We prepare, he said simply. For what, I don't know. But something's coming, Thorne. Something that's going to change everything. He was right. Over the next week, the incidents increased exponentially. Not just disappearances now, but appearances. People who'd been missing for years suddenly walking out of the desert, unchanged, unaged, with stories of impossible places and bargains made with entities older than human memory. Some had black eyes, some didn't. All of them spoke of Carmen, of the growing army in the between spaces, of the child Maria who could reshape reality with her thoughts. The government tried to keep it quiet, but you can't hide something this big. Videos leaked online of people walking through walls, of children who could be in two places at once, of shadows moving independently of their sources. The media called it mass hysteria, hallucinations, elaborate hoaxes, but those of us who'd been there knew better. On the 10th day after the mass appearance, I received a message. Not through my phone or radio, but appearing directly in my mind in Carmen's voice. Tomorrow. Mile marker 17, midnight. Come alone or don't come at all. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. After tomorrow, there may not be choices left. I knew it was probably a trap. I knew I should report it, bring backup, follow protocol, but I also knew that if there was any chance of preventing a catastrophe, of finding a peaceful solution to whatever was about to happen, I had to take it. I arrived at mile marker 17 at 11:47 p.m., alone as instructed. The desert was eerily quiet, even for an October night. No insects, no distant coyote calls, not even wind. Just my breathing and heartbeat, both too loud in the silence. I'd left a letter for Grimm and Ashford, explaining where I'd gone and why. If I didn't come back, at least they'd know what happened. Harrison and his Homeland Security team were probably monitoring the area with satellites and drones, but I doubted their technology could see what I was about to witness. At exactly midnight, the air in front of me began to ripple. A doorway opened in the space between seconds, and Carmen stepped through. She looked more solid than before, more real, though her eyes remained those infinite black pools. "You came," she said, and there was genuine surprise in her voice. "You said there might be another way. I'm here to listen." She studied me for a long moment. "Walk with me." We walked into the desert, but not the desert I knew. With each step, reality shifted around us. The familiar saguaro cacti became twisted, ancient things with faces in their bark. The stars above rearranged themselves into constellations I'd never seen. The sand beneath our feet sometimes felt like sand, sometimes like walking on water, sometimes like nothing at all. "This is the between space," Carmen explained. "Neither your world nor theirs, but the bridge connecting all worlds. Why show me this? Because you need to understand what's at stake." She stopped and turned to face me. "The old ones aren't evil, Agent Thorne. They're not good either. They simply are. They've existed since before humans drew their first maps, claimed their first territories, built their first walls. To them, our borders are like lines drawn in water, temporary, meaningless. But they're not meaningless to us." "No," she agreed, "which is why we need translators. Bridges, people who can help both sides understand each other." We continued walking, and I noticed shadows moving alongside us. Other figures in the between space, watching, waiting. "How many people have they taken?" I asked. "Taken is the wrong word. How many have they saved? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands, over the centuries. Every person who died alone in the desert, every family separated by walls and laws, every soul lost between here and there. They offered them sanctuary when your world offered only death. But at what cost?" Carmen stopped again, and this time I could see pain in those black eyes. "The cost is becoming something else, something not quite human anymore." We can never fully return to your world. We exist here, in the spaces between breath, between heartbeats, between moments. And Maria, your daughter?" Carmen's expression softened. "She's the first of a new generation, born here in the between space. She'll never know the limitations of a single reality. She'll be able to walk through walls, exist in multiple places at once, reshape the world with her thoughts. She's evolution, Agent Thorne. Natural selection responding to an impossible situation. That's what frightens people. Good. They should be frightened. Change should be frightening. Comfort is the enemy of progress." We'd been walking for what felt like hours, but when I checked my watch, only minutes had passed. Time moved differently here. "So, what's the alternative?" I asked. "What's this other way you mentioned?" Carmen led me to what looked like a vast amphitheater carved from shadow and starlight. In it were hundreds, maybe thousands of people. All the missing, all the lost, all the forgotten. They sat in perfect silence, their black eyes focused on us. "We could coexist," Carmen said. "Your world and ours, separate but connected. We wouldn't return physically, wouldn't reclaim the land as the old ones want. But we'd want something in exchange. What? Recognition. Acknowledgement. The truth about what happens at borders, about who gets saved and who gets sacrificed. No more covering up the deaths, the disappearances. No more pretending we never existed. The government would never agree to that. Then we go with the original plan. Tomorrow night, the barriers fall completely. Everyone you see here, plus thousands more, will walk back into your world. Not as refugees or immigrants, but as reclaimed souls with the power to walk through walls. To exist outside your laws, to punish those who hurt them. I looked at the assembled crowd. Men, women, children, all watching me with those impossible black eyes. All waiting for an answer I didn't have. "Can I talk to some of them?" I asked. "The other missing people?" Carmen nodded and led me down into the amphitheater. The first person I approached was a middle-aged man who'd been reported missing 3 years ago. "Ernesto Chavez," I said, recognizing him from the files. "Your family thinks you're dead." "I am dead," he replied, his voice hollow. "Died of dehydration 40 miles from Tucson. The old ones found my body, offered me this. It's not life, but it's not death either. It's something else." "Do you regret it?" "I regret leaving my family. But I don't regret surviving, even if this is what survival looks like." I talked to dozens of them. Each had a similar story. Death or near death in the desert. The offer from the old ones. The choice between true death and this strange existence. Some were happy with their choice. Others mourned what they'd lost. All of them were changed in ways that went beyond their black eyes. A young woman named Patricia showed me how she could phase through solid matter. A teenager named Miguel demonstrated how he could be in 3 places at once. A mother named Isabella introduced me to her twin daughters, born in the between space, who communicated without words and could make flowers bloom in the barren shadow desert. "We're not monsters," Isabella said. "We're just different. Adapted to a world that had no place for us." I was about to respond when a violent tremor shook the between space. The shadow amphitheater cracked, reality splintering like a broken mirror. "What's happening?" I shouted over the sudden roar of collapsing space. Carmen's face went pale. "They found us. Your government. They're attacking the barrier." Through the cracks in reality, I could see military vehicles surrounding mile marker 17 in the real world. Soldiers with weapons I didn't recognize. Scientists with equipment that sparked and hummed with unnatural energy. And Harrison, standing at the center of it all, giving orders. They're trying to seal us in, Carmen said. Permanent separation. They'd rather trap us here forever than risk us returning. The old ones materialized around us, their forms more solid and terrifying than I'd ever seen them. They were angry, their dozen eyes blazing with fury. Betrayal! They hissed in unison. The agent led them here. Betrayal. No, I protested. I came alone. I didn't tell anyone. But then I remembered the letter I'd left, the tracking device standard in all Border Patrol vehicles, the dozen ways Harrison could have followed me without my knowledge. It doesn't matter now, Carmen said. They've made their choice. Now we make ours. She turned to the assembled crowd of the forgotten. They would trap us here. They would deny us even the hope of return. They would erase us completely rather than acknowledge what they've done to us. What do we say to that? The crowd rose as one, their voices joining in a sound that wasn't quite human anymore. It was rage and sorrow and determination, all mixed into something that made reality itself shudder. We say no, Carmen continued. We say we will not be forgotten. We will not be erased. We will return, with or without their permission. She looked at me, and for a moment her eyes flickered from black to brown. The eyes of the young woman she'd been before all this. I'm sorry, Agent Thorne. I hoped we could find a peaceful solution. But your people have chosen war. The old ones began to chant in a language that predated human speech. The cracks in reality widened, but instead of sealing, they began to spread. The barrier wasn't being reinforced, it was being shattered completely. Stop, I shouted. There has to be another way. There was, one of the old ones said. You were that way. The bridge between worlds. But bridges can be burned from either side. In the real world, I could see Harrison's equipment starting to overload. Soldiers were backing away as the air itself began to tear. The between space was collapsing, but not in the way they'd intended. Instead of being sealed away, it was collapsing into our reality, merging the two worlds by force. Get me back, I said to Carmen. Let me try to stop this. It's too late. It's never too late. You said I was a bridge. Let me be one. Carmen studied me for a long moment, then nodded. She took my hand, and her touch was ice cold. This will hurt. She wasn't lying. Being forced through a collapsing reality barrier felt like being turned inside out, every atom of my body screaming in protest. I materialized in the real world right in front of Harrison's command vehicle, gasping and retching. Thorne, Harrison grabbed me. What did you do? Trying to stop a war, I gasped. Call off the attack. Now. We're not attacking. We're containing. You're provoking. They were willing to negotiate to coexist, but you're forcing their hand. They're an invasion force. They're refugees. Dead refugees who just want to be remembered. The ground beneath us cracked, and through the fissures I could see the purple light of the between space. Shadows began pouring out, not the forgotten, not yet, but the old one's advance force. They moved like liquid darkness, surrounding the military vehicles, disabling weapons with a touch. Fall back, Harrison shouted, but it was too late. The sky tore open like paper, and through the rift came Carmen, carrying Maria. But Maria wasn't a baby anymore. She'd aged years in minutes, now appearing to be about 5 or 6, with those impossible fingers and eyes that held galaxies. Stop! I shouted, standing between the military forces and the emerging forgotten. Both of you, stop! Surprisingly, they did. Everyone froze, watching me. This doesn't have to be a war, I said, my voice carrying across the desert. Carmen, you said you wanted recognition, acknowledgement. Harrison, the government wants to protect its people. These aren't mutually exclusive goals. They're trying to erase us, Carmen said. They're trying to invade, Harrison countered. You're both wrong. I turned to Carmen first. They're scared. Scared of what they don't understand, of losing control. Can you blame them? Then to Harrison. They're not invading. They're already here. They've been here. They just want to stop hiding. Maria stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice was ancient and young simultaneously. The agent speaks truth. We don't want your world, we have our own. But the borders between them are breaking anyway, not because of us, but because you've pushed too many people into the spaces between. The weight of the forgotten is breaking reality itself. So, what do we do? Ashford had arrived, along with Grimm and dozens of other agents. We make a new treaty, I said, not between nations, but between realities. The forgotten get their recognition, memorials, acknowledgement, the truth about what happened to them. In exchange, they stay in the between space, but with open doors. Families can visit through properly controlled portals. The old ones get what they originally wanted, a world without borders, just not in the way anyone expected. That's impossible, Harrison said. Look around you, I replied. We're past impossible. Carmen and Harrison looked at each other, across the divide of realities. Slowly, Carmen lowered Maria to the ground. Harrison holstered his weapon. We would need guarantees, Carmen said. So would we, Harrison replied. Then we negotiate. Like humans do, like we should have from the beginning. The negotiations took 3 days. 3 surreal days where reality flickered and shifted, where the dead and living sat across from each other at folding tables in the desert, where the old ones loomed overhead like storm clouds while government officials tried to draft treaties with entities that existed outside time. In the end, we reached an agreement. The 17-mile Accord, they called it, after the mile marker where it all started. The between space would remain separate but accessible. Controlled portals would be established at specific locations, allowing families to reunite with their lost ones, even if they couldn't bring them fully back. The forgotten would help patrol the border from their side, preventing deaths by guiding the lost to safety. In exchange, a monument would be built. Not just a wall of names, but a living memorial that would tell the true story of everyone who died crossing, everyone who'd disappeared, everyone who'd been forgotten. Carmen would serve as the first ambassador between worlds, with Maria as her successor when she came of age. The old ones would remain in the shadows, watching, waiting, ensuring the treaty was honored. And I would be the bridge, the one who walked between both worlds, making sure neither side forgot the other. The last time I saw Carmen before the formalization of the treaty, she pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said, and for a moment her eyes flickered brown again, "for seeing us as people, not monsters." "You're not people anymore," I said honestly. "But you're not monsters either. You're something new, something we need to learn to live with." "And will we? Learn to live with each other?" I looked at the portals being constructed, at the scientists and shadow beings working side by side, at Maria playing with both human and between-space children, her laughter echoing across realities. "We don't have a choice," I said. "The borders are already broken. We can either build bridges or walls, and walls." I gestured at the space between worlds. "Walls don't seem to work anymore." Carmen smiled, a sad but hopeful expression. "No, they never really did." 6 months have passed since the 17-mile Accord. The portals operate on schedule, allowing families to visit their lost ones for a few hours each week. The memorial has become a pilgrimage site with thousands coming to read the names and stories of the forgotten. Sometimes, if you're there at the right time, you can see them. Shadows moving among the living, leaving flowers at their own memorials, whispering messages to loved ones who can almost, but not quite, hear them. The disappearances haven't stopped entirely, but they've changed. Now, when someone dies in the desert, they're given a choice immediately. Most choose true death, preferring the finality to the eternal existence in between. But some, those with unfinished business or loved ones to watch over, choose the shadow life. I still patrol the border, but my job has changed. Now, I'm as likely to be escorting families to portal sites as I am to be checking documents. I carry messages between worlds, mediate disputes between the living and the not quite dead, and try to maintain the fragile peace we've built. Sometimes I visit Rosa Santos. She goes to the portal every week to see Carmen and Maria. They can't touch, can't truly embrace, but they can see each other, talk, share stories. Rosa says it's enough. Not what she wanted, but enough. Agent Grimm now heads the new Interdimensional Relations Division. Ashford retired, saying he'd seen enough impossible things for one lifetime. Harrison still monitors everything from his hidden facilities, convinced that the treaty is just a delay before an inevitable invasion. Maybe he's right. Maybe one day the Forgotten will decide that recognition isn't enough, that they want their world back. But for now, we have peace. A strange, impossible peace between the living and the lost, between what is and what was, between the world we know and the spaces in between. And somewhere out there, in a place that's neither here nor there, a baby stroller sits in the desert sand, waiting for the next lost soul to find it, to make their choice, to step into the space between worlds where the Forgotten refuse to be forgotten anymore. I still dream about that day, about finding the stroller, about Carmen's black eyes, about Maria's impossible fingers. But now, the dreams don't frighten me. They remind me that the world is bigger and stranger than we ever imagined. That borders are just lines we draw to make ourselves feel safe. And that sometimes, the most important discoveries come from stepping into the spaces we're not supposed to see. The desert still plays tricks on your mind. The heat still shimmers like water. The silence still presses down like a weight. But now, when I patrol those empty stretches of sand and stone, I know I'm never really alone. The Forgotten are always there, just a breath away, a heartbeat between worlds, waiting, watching, remembering. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon is dark and the stars seem especially close, I can hear it again. That baby crying that comes from everywhere and nowhere. Only now I know what it really is. It's the sound of the between space calling to the lost, offering them a choice, a chance, a different kind of survival. The sound of the Forgotten, refusing to disappear. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a moonless November night. I'd been with Border Patrol for 8 years by then, working the graveyard shift along the New Mexico-Mexico border, and thought I'd seen everything the desert had to offer. Agent Percival Blackwood, they call me, though most of the guys just use Blackwood or Percy when the supervisors aren't around. That night changed everything I thought I knew about what we were really guarding out there in the darkness. Unit 12, we've got sensor activity in Sector 779. The dispatcher's voice crackled through my radio. Multiple hits. Moving pattern suggests possible group crossing. Sector 779 was one of the most desolate stretches of our patrol area. Nothing but sand, rocks, and the occasional scraggly mesquite tree for miles in any direction. It was also a known corridor for drug runners and human traffickers, though activity had been unusually quiet there for the past 3 months. Copy that, dispatch, Unit 12, responding. ETA 15 minutes. I turned my patrol vehicle toward the sector, the headlights cutting through the absolute darkness of the desert night. No moon meant navigation by GPS and instinct, the kind of darkness where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face without artificial light. Perfect conditions for someone trying to cross undetected, but also perfect conditions for our thermal imaging equipment. As I approached the coordinates, I switched on the thermal scanner mounted on my vehicle's roof. The screen showed nothing but the cool blue of the desert floor and the slightly warmer signatures of a few small animals, probably kangaroo rats or jackrabbits. No human heat signatures anywhere. Dispatch, Unit 12 at location. Negative on visual or thermal contact. Sensors are still showing activity, Unit 12. 5 distinct signatures, moving north-northeast at approximately 2 miles per hour. I frowned at my equipment. The ground sensors were notorious for false positives, sometimes triggered by large animals, sometimes by shifting sand and high winds. But tonight was dead calm, and 5 simultaneous triggers suggested something bigger than wildlife. I grabbed my portable thermal unit, my flashlight, and my rifle, then stepped out into the suffocating darkness. The November air was cold enough to make me zip up my jacket, maybe 40 degrees, with that bone-dry desert chill that seems to pull the warmth right out of your body. The ground here was hard-packed sand with patches of loose gravel, perfect for tracking. I swept my flashlight across the area where the sensors had triggered. What I found made me key my radio immediately. Dispatch, I've got tracks here. Multiple boot prints, fresh, maybe an hour old, but... I paused, trying to figure out how to describe what I was seeing. They just stop. 5 sets of tracks, walking in single file, then nothing. Like they just vanished. Could they have doubled back? Covered their tracks? I knelt beside the prints, examining them more carefully. Negative. The tracks just end. No disturbance in the sand around them, no brush marks from covering them. They just stop. I followed the tracks backward, toward where they'd come from. They led south for about 50 yards, then seemed to emerge from nowhere just as abruptly as they'd ended. 5 people had apparently materialized out of thin air, walked 50 yards north, then vanished again. Unit 12, recommend you wait for backup. Unit 8 is 20 minutes out. But something in the sand caught my eye. Where the tracks ended, there was a slight depression in the ground, almost imperceptible unless you were looking for it. I brushed away some of the loose sand and found something that shouldn't have been there. A wooden plank, old and weathered, but deliberately placed. Dispatch, I may have found something. Investigating. Unit 12, wait for backup. I was already pulling at the plank. It came up easily, revealing more planks underneath, forming what looked like a covering. My heart rate quickened. Tunnels weren't uncommon along the border. Drug cartels had been building elaborate underground passages for decades. But this looked older, much older than any narco tunnel I'd ever seen. I pulled up 3 more planks, revealing a rough-cut opening in the ground about 3 feet, square. The walls were reinforced with what looked like railroad ties, the kind they used back in the 1800s. My flashlight beam disappeared into the darkness below, showing a ladder made of newer wood descending into the earth. The smart thing would have been to wait for backup. Set up a perimeter, call in the tunnel rats team, follow protocol. But something about those 5 sets of footprints bothered me. They'd gone down there an hour ago, according to the track aging. If this was a trafficking situation, every minute counted. People could be dying down there. Dispatch, I've found a tunnel entrance. Historic construction, recently accessed. I'm going to make entry. Negative, Unit 12. Wait for backup. Do not... I turned my radio volume down and began descending the ladder. The tunnel was narrow, maybe 4 feet wide and 6 feet tall. forcing me to duck slightly as I moved forward. The walls were a mix of carved rock and packed earth, supported by those ancient railroad ties every few yards. The air was stale and cold, with an underlying smell I couldn't quite identify, something metallic and organic at the same time, like old pennies mixed with rotting meat. My flashlight beam penetrated maybe 20 feet ahead before being swallowed by the darkness. The floor was smooth, worn down by what must have been decades of use. But the strangest thing was the complete absence of any modern touches. No electric lights, no ventilation systems, no drug packaging or equipment. This wasn't a cartel tunnel. About 30 yards in, the tunnel opened into a small chamber, maybe 10 feet square. My flashlight swept across the space and I had to suppress a gasp. The walls were lined with shelves carved directly into the rock, and on those shelves were personal belongings. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. Wallets, watches, rings, photographs, children's toys, rosaries, all in various states of decay, some looking recent, others clearly decades old. I picked up one of the wallets, careful not to disturb potential evidence. The leather was cracked and dry, but I could still read the driver's license inside. Cordelia Ravencrest, D.O.B., March 15, 1982. The license had expired in 2001. I ran the name through my mental database of missing persons cases I'd studied. Cordelia Ravencrest had disappeared while hiking near the border 22 years ago. Her body was never found. Another wallet. Marcus Webb. Date of birth, July 22, 1975. Disappeared 2003. A child's bracelet with a name engraved, Emma Thorne. Missing since 2010, age 7. Every item I examined belonged to someone who had vanished in this area of the desert over the past several decades. Some were migrants who'd never made it across. Others were hikers, border patrol agents, local residents, people who'd simply vanished without a trace. I photographed everything, my hands shaking slightly. This was a shrine or a trophy room, I couldn't tell which. But whoever had collected these items had been operating here for a very long time. A sound echoed from deeper in the tunnel. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Multiple sets. I clicked off my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall, rifle ready. The footsteps were getting closer, but there was something wrong with the rhythm. They were too synchronized, like marching, but with an irregular pattern that made my skin crawl. Then I heard the humming. It was a low, monotonous drone. Multiple voices humming in unison but slightly off-key with each other, creating a discordant harmony that made my teeth ache. The sound grew louder, closer. I clicked on my flashlight. 5 figures stood at the entrance to the chamber, exactly where the footprints had suggested they'd be. But these weren't migrants or drug runners. They wore modern clothes, jeans, t-shirts, sneakers. But their faces were wrong. Their skin had a grayish, mummified quality, stretched too tight over their bones. Their eyes were open but clouded, like those of a corpse. And they were all smiling, their lips pulled back to reveal teeth that were too white, too perfect. "Agent Blackwood," they said in unison, their voices flat and emotionless. "We've been waiting for you." I raised my rifle. "Federal agent." "Identify yourselves and put your hands where I can see them." They didn't move, just kept smiling that horrible smile. Then the one in front, a woman who looked to be in her 30s, spoke alone. "You want to know what happened to them. To all of them. We can show you." "Who are you?" "We are the collected," she said, "just like them." She gestured to the shelves of belongings. "Just like you will be." I kept my rifle trained on them. "You're coming with me. All of you. Turn around, hands behind your heads." They laughed. a dry, rattling sound like Yas wind through dead leaves. You still don't understand, Agent Blackwood. You're already with us. You've been with us since you entered the chamber. I became aware of a strange sensation, like pins and needles spreading through my body. My thermal scanner, still hanging from my belt, was beeping frantically. I glanced at it and nearly dropped my rifle. It showed 6 heat signatures in the chamber, the 5 figures in front of me, all reading at ambient temperature, no body heat at all. And one behind me, temperature dropping rapidly. The 6th signature was me, and according to the scanner, my body temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the last minute. I spun around looking for an exit, but the tunnel I'd entered through was gone. Solid rock wall where the opening had been. That was impossible. I'd just come through there. The collector will be here soon, the woman said. He'll want to add your belongings to the shrine. Your badge will look nice next to Agent Morrison's. You remember Morrison, don't you? Disappeared in 2015? His family still thinks he ran off to Mexico. Morrison. I'd known him, worked with him. He'd vanished during a routine patrol. Vehicle found abandoned, no sign of struggle. What is this place? I demanded, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. A gathering point, she replied. A collection. He's been collecting for so long, he barely remembers when he started. Spanish conquistadors, Apache warriors, Mexican revolutionaries, American settlers, modern travelers, all gathered here, preserved, collected. Who is he? The 5 figures parted, creating a pathway deeper into the tunnel system. From the darkness beyond came footsteps, but these were different. Heavier, more deliberate, accompanied by a sound like metal dragging on stone. What emerged from that darkness still haunts my dreams. It might have been human once, long ago. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, wrapped in what looked like a patchwork of different clothing from different eras. A Spanish conquistador's chest plate over a Union Army jacket, modern tactical pants, Apache moccasins. Its face was hidden under a wide-brimmed hat that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But I could see its hands, impossibly long fingers ending in nails that had grown into yellowed claws. Agent Percival Blackwood, it said, and its voice was like grinding stone. Born September 3rd, 1987. Joined Border Patrol 2016. No family, no one to miss you. Perfect for the collection. How do you know? I know everyone who walks my desert, it interrupted. I've been here longer than your borders, your fences, your nations. I was here when the Apache ruled these lands. I was here when the Spanish came with their crosses and steel. I was here when your country drew its lines in the sand. And I'll be here when those lines are forgotten. It moved closer, and I could smell it now. Centuries of dust and decay, dried blood and something else. Something older than anything should be. You take people, I said, backing away until I hit the wall. Why? Everyone needs a purpose, it replied. Mine is to collect, to preserve, to remember. Every person who disappears in my desert becomes part of my collection. Their belongings here, their bodies elsewhere, their souls. Well, that's complicated. The 5 people. These 5. They're dead, aren't they? Dead is a limited concept, it said. They exist, they serve. They remember who they were, even if they can't quite be it anymore. The woman who'd spoken earlier nodded. I'm Rebecca Marsh, disappeared June 2020. I remember my life, my family. I just can't reach it anymore. Can't leave, can't die, can't live. Just collected. My radio crackled to life, louder despite having turned it down. Unit 12, backup is on scene. Where are you? We found the tunnel entrance, but Blackwood, the tunnel only goes 5 feet before hitting solid rock. Where are you? The collector laughed, a sound like breaking bones. They can't reach you. You're not in their tunnel anymore. You're in mine, in the between space, the place where the missing go. My thermal scanner's still transmitting, I said, desperate. They'll track it. Let them try. Your signal is coming from a place that doesn't exist on their maps. A place between places where I keep my collection safe from the world above. The collector circled me slowly, its movements fluid despite its size. Every step it took seemed to make the chamber grow colder, darker, as if it was dragging shadows with it. You want to know how this works, it said, not a question but a statement. They all do at first. They want to understand the rules, find the loophole, the escape. There isn't one, Agent Blackwood. There never has been. I kept my rifle raised, though I was beginning to suspect it would be useless against whatever this thing was. People will look for me. The Border Patrol doesn't just forget its agents. No, the collector agreed. They'll search for exactly 72 hours. They'll find your vehicle. They'll find the tunnel entrance. They'll even find that it only extends 5 feet before hitting solid rock, just like your backup reported. They'll conclude you wandered off into the desert, got disoriented, died of exposure. Another tragic loss in the line of duty. They might even put your name on a memorial wall. The 5 collected people stood perfectly still, watching me with those clouded eyes. Their smiles hadn't wavered. Show him the gallery, the woman, Rebecca Marsh, suggested. He should see what he's becoming part of. The collector nodded, and suddenly the walls of the chamber began to shift and flow like water. The entrance I'd been backed against dissolved, revealing a passage I was certain hadn't been there before. The collector gestured with one impossibly long arm. Walk with me, Agent Blackwood. Let me show you my life's work. I had no choice. The 5 collected, blocked any other route, and the walls seemed to pulse and shift whenever I looked for an escape. So I walked, keeping my rifle ready, following the collector deeper into this impossible space. The passage opened into a vast cavern that couldn't possibly exist. We were maybe 50 feet underground based on my descent, but this space stretched up into darkness beyond the reach of my flashlight. The walls were lined with alcoves, hundreds of them, each containing a standing figure. They were all perfectly preserved, like mannequins in a museum. Men, women, children, from every era imaginable. A Spanish conquistador in rusted armor stood next to a young Apache woman in traditional dress. A family from what looked like the 1950s. Father in a business suit, mother in a floral dress, 2 children in their Sunday best, stood frozen mid-stride. A group of modern migrants, backpacks still on their shoulders, water jugs in their hands. 537, the collector said proudly. Collected over 3 centuries. Each one perfect, each one preserved at the moment of acquisition. I approached one of the newer figures, a Border Patrol agent in a uniform from the early 2000s. His badge read Morrison. The same Morrison the woman had mentioned, who'd disappeared in 2015. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, but as I watched, they moved slightly, tracking my movement. He's alive, I breathed. Alive, dead, these are limited concepts, the collector repeated. They exist in a state between. Aware, but unable to act. Preserved, but not truly living. It's quite elegant, really. It's monstrous, the collector laughed again. Monstrous? I gave them immortality. They would have died in the desert, forgotten, their bones scattered by animals. Now they're part of something eternal. Agent Morrison had a wife, I said, 2 kids. And they mourned him and moved on, as people do, as people always have. But here, he continues, he is remembered. I noticed something else about the collected figures. Thin, translucent threads seemed to connect them all, like spider silk catching the light. The threads led from figure to figure, creating an intricate web throughout the cavern, all eventually leading back to the collector. "What are those?" I asked, pointing at the threads. "Connections," it replied. Each person collected brings their memories, their experiences, their essence. I preserve not just their bodies but their stories. Through these threads, I know everything they knew, remember everything they remembered. I am a living archive of human experience in this desert. You're a parasite. The collector's hat tilted, and for the first time, I caught a glimpse of what was beneath it. Not a face exactly, but a constantly shifting mass of features, as if it was cycling through the faces of everyone it had ever collected. Perhaps, it acknowledged, but a necessary one. Do you know how many people have died in this desert? Thousands, tens of thousands. Most are never found, never identified, never mourned. I give them permanence. We continued through the cavern, past more and more figures. I recognized some from missing persons files I'd studied. Hikers, migrants, even a few law enforcement officers. Each perfectly preserved. Each with that slight eye movement that suggested some level of consciousness trapped inside. "Here," the collector said, stopping at an empty alcove. "This will be yours." You should feel honored. Border Patrol agents are rare additions. Only 4 in my entire collection. "I'm not staying," I said, though the words sounded hollow even to me. The collector reached out with one long finger and touched my shoulder. Immediately, I felt a spreading numbness, like ice water flowing through my veins. My thermal scanner was beeping frantically now. My body temperature had dropped another 5 degrees. "You're already changing," it observed. "The process began the moment you entered my domain. Soon, you'll be ready for preservation." I pulled away, but the numbness lingered. There has to be a way out. There's always a way out. Tell that to them. The collector gestured to the hundreds of figures. Some have been here for centuries. If there was a way out, don't you think they would have found it? But then I noticed something. One of the figures, a young woman in clothing from the 1970s, wasn't just moving her eyes. Her finger was twitching, slightly, repeatedly. A pattern, Morse code. HELPME. She was still fighting after all these years. "They're not as gone as you think, are they?" I said to the collector. It turned sharply, those shifting features momentarily settling into an expression of anger. "They are content. They are preserved. They are prisoners. They're prisoners and they want out." The 5 collected people who had been following us stepped forward. Rebecca Marsh spoke. "We serve willingly. We understand our purpose." But her finger was twitching too. LIES. The collector didn't seem to notice. "You will understand in time." They all do. The fight leaves them eventually. My radio crackled again. "Blackwood, we're getting weird readings from your thermal unit. It shows you're everywhere?" The signal is scattered across a 3-mile radius. "What's going on down there?" I grabbed the radio, hope flaring. If the signal was scattered, maybe this space wasn't as isolated as the collector claimed. "This is Blackwood. I'm in some kind of underground complex, multiple missing persons located. Request immediate." The radio dissolved in my hand, turning to sand that slipped through my fingers. "Nice try," the collector said, "but no outside communication is allowed. It disrupts the preservation process." I was running out of options and could feel my body growing colder, stiffer. The numbness was spreading up my arm, making it hard to hold my rifle. But then, I remembered something from my training. Old mine shafts and tunnel systems in this area often connected to natural cave systems. If this place existed in some between space, as the collector claimed, maybe it still had connections to the real world. "You said you've been here for centuries," I said, stalling for time while I looked for any sign of natural cave formations. "What are you?" "I am what the desert made me," it replied. "I came here with the Spanish, searching for gold. I found something else, something older. It offered me a deal, eternal life in exchange for eternal service. I would become the keeper of the lost, the guardian of the forgotten. And you've been kidnapping people ever since." "Not kidnapping, collecting, preserving. Without me, they would be dust. With me, they are eternal." I spotted it then, a section of the cavern wall that looked different, more natural, less shaped. Water stains suggested it connected to something above, maybe a natural aquifer. "But you're lonely," I said, understanding suddenly. "That's why you keep them conscious. You're not preserving them for their sake. You're keeping them as company." The collector's shifting features settled momentarily into an expression of surprise, then rage. "You understand nothing." "I understand that you were human once, that you made a deal you probably regret, that you're as much a prisoner here as they are." The temperature in the cavern dropped dramatically. Ice began forming on the walls. The collected figures started moving more obviously now. Fingers twitching, heads turning slightly, all of them spelling out the same message in whatever way they could. "HELPUS. Silence." The collector roared, and the threads connecting it to all the figures pulsed with a sickly light. The collected immediately went still again. But in that moment of distraction, I saw my chance. The natural cave section had a small opening near the ceiling, maybe big enough for a person to squeeze through. I just had to get to it. "You know what I think," I said, backing slowly toward that wall. "I think whatever you made a deal with tricked you. You're not a guardian or a preserver. You're just another piece of its collection. The only difference is, it lets you move around." The collector lunged at me with inhuman speed, but I was ready. I dove to the side, rolled, and came up running. The 5 collected people moved to block me, but their movements were stiff, mechanical. I pushed past Rebecca Marsh, whispering, "I'll come back for you," as I did. Her eyes widened slightly, the first genuine expression I'd seen from any of them. I reached the wall and started climbing. The rock was rough, natural, real in a way nothing else in this place felt. The collector was right behind me, its long arms reaching up to grab my legs. "You cannot escape! No one ever escapes!" My fingers found the opening. It was tight, barely wide enough for my shoulders, but it was something. I pulled myself up, squeezing into the passage as the collector's claws scraped against my boots. The passage was a natural limestone tube, formed by centuries of water erosion. I could feel air movement. Real air, not the stale atmosphere of the collector's domain. I crawled forward, ignoring the collector's roars of rage echoing behind me. The passage opened into another chamber, this one definitely natural. My flashlight revealed limestone formations, stalactites and stalagmites. And there, a shaft of moonlight coming through a gap in the ceiling. I climbed toward it, my body still partially numb but functioning. Behind me, I could hear something large trying to force itself through the passage. The collector, trying to follow. The gap in the ceiling was narrow, but I managed to squeeze through. I emerged into the desert night, gasping in the cold, clean air. I was about a mile from where I'd entered the tunnel, according to my GPS. I ran ran toward the lights of the border patrol vehicles I could see in the distance. Behind me, the ground began to crack and buckle, as if something massive was trying to break through from below. Blackwood. It was Agent Lysander Nightingale, one of my colleagues. Where the hell have you been? You've been gone for 3 hours. 3 hours. It had felt like less than one. Your thermal scanner has been going haywire. We thought you were dead. Listen to me, I gasped, grabbing his shoulders. We need to evacuate this area, now. There's something underground, something that's been taking people. The ground erupted 50 yards away. The collector emerged, but in the moonlight it looked different. Smaller, more human, almost pitiful. It stood at the edge of the hole it had created, not pursuing further. You'll be back, it called out, its voice carrying on the wind. They always come back. The desert calls them, and they return. Then it descended back into the earth, the hole sealing behind it as if it had never been. Nightingale was staring at me. Blackwood, what the hell was that? I don't know, I lied. Who would believe me? I think I found an old tunnel system. There might be remains down there, old ones. We reported it as a potential archaeological site. The next day, a team went to investigate. They found the wooden planks I'd pulled up, found the tunnel entrance, but the tunnel only went 5 feet before hitting solid rock, just as backup had reported. There was no chamber, no collection, no evidence of what I'd experienced. Except for one thing. In my pocket, I found a wallet. Not mine. It was old, leather cracked with age. Inside was a driver's license. Cordelia Raven Crest, D.O.B., March 15, 1982. I'd grabbed it without thinking when I first examined it in the collector's chamber. It was proof that what I'd experienced was real. I tried to return to the spot where I'd emerged from the natural cave, but I could never find it again. The desert had reclaimed it, or perhaps it had never really existed in our reality to begin with. But the dreams started that night. The dreams were worse than the experience itself. Every night I found myself back in that cavern, surrounded by the collected. But in the dreams I could hear them, all of them. Hundreds of voices crying out at once, begging for release. And every night the collector would appear, no longer hostile but almost sympathetic. You understand now, it would say in my dreams. You've seen the truth. You can't unsee it. After a week of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to tell someone. I went to Lysander Nightingale first. We'd worked together for 4 years, been through dozens of dangerous situations. If anyone would believe me, it would be him. We met at a diner in Las Cruces, far from the patrol station. I laid out everything: the chamber, the collector, the preserved people, Cordelia Raven Crest's wallet that I still carried as proof. Nightingale listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Percy, when's the last time you took leave? This job, it gets to people. The isolation, the stress. I'm not having a breakdown," I insisted, pulling out the wallet. "This is real. Cordelia Ravencrest disappeared 22 years ago. How else would I have this?" He examined the wallet carefully. It could be planted evidence. Maybe you found an old crime scene, got disoriented in the tunnel. The tunnel that only goes 5 feet. Maybe there was a gas leak. Carbon monoxide can cause hallucinations, false memories. I realized then that no one would believe me without seeing it themselves. But I also remembered the collector's words. "You'll be back." They always come back. "You're right," I said, forcing myself to calm down. "I probably need some rest. Been pushing too hard lately." Nightingale relaxed slightly. Take some time off, get your head straight. This desert can mess with anyone's mind if you let it. But I wasn't giving up. I started researching on my own time, diving into historical records, old Spanish colonial documents, Apache legends, anything that might reference the collector or the underground chamber. What I found chilled me to the bone. There were dozens of references, scattered across centuries, never quite explicit, but all pointing to the same thing. Spanish conquistadors wrote of El coleccionista de almas, the collector of souls, who dwelt beneath the desert. Apache stories spoke of the keeper of the lost, a spirit that gathered those who died alone in the wasteland. Mexican revolutionary documents mentioned soldiers who disappeared near certain areas, only for their belongings to be found arranged in patterns in caves. But the most disturbing discovery came from a Border Patrol report from 1987, filed by an agent named Douglas Rourke. He described finding an underground chamber full of personal effects, experiencing lost time, and encountering preserved bodies. His report was marked as psychological evaluation required, and he was transferred to a desk job. He committed suicide 3 months later, leaving a note that said only, "They're calling me back." I tracked down Rourke's partner from that time, now retired and living in Phoenix. Anthony Vasquez was in his 70s, sharp-eyed and wary when I showed up at his door with my Border Patrol credentials. "I know why you're here," he said before I could even explain. "You found it, didn't you?" The collection. "You know about it?" Doug told me everything. I didn't believe him at first, thought the desert had finally broken him. But after he died, Vasquez led me into his house, to a room filled with maps, documents, photographs. I've been tracking disappearances for 35 years. Every one that happens near that area, every person who vanishes without a trace. The wall was covered with pictures and red string connecting them, like something out of a conspiracy theorist's basement. But the pattern was undeniable. The disappearances clustered around specific coordinates, forming a rough circle about 5 miles in diameter. "How many?" I asked. "In just the last 35 years?" 87 confirmed, probably more. Before that, who knows? Hundreds? Thousands? That thing's been collecting since before we were a country. Why hasn't anyone done anything about it? Vasquez laughed bitterly. Do what? Tell the government there's an immortal Spanish conquistador stealing people in another dimension? They'd lock you up. Besides, I think some of them know. They just consider it an acceptable loss. 87 people over 35 years is nothing compared to the drug traffic they stop in that sector. There has to be a way to stop it. To free them. Doug thought the same thing. He went back 3 times trying to find a way to release the collected. The 3rd time, he came back different, quieter, colder. He lasted 3 months before the dreams drove him to eat his gun. The dreams, I said. You know about the dreams. Everyone who encounters the collector gets them. It's how it calls you back. The dreams will get worse, more vivid. You'll start seeing the collected during the day, in reflections and shadows. And eventually, you'll have to go back. They all go back. Not me. Vasquez shook his head sadly. That's what Doug said. Over the next 2 weeks, he was right about the dreams getting worse. But it wasn't just dreams anymore. I'd catch glimpses of the collected in my peripheral vision. Rebecca Marsh standing at the edge of my patrol sector. Morrison reflected in my vehicle's mirrors. Cordelia Ravencrest herself, young and lost-looking, appearing in the corner of my apartment at night. They were trying to tell me something, all of them making the same gesture, pointing back toward the desert, toward the collector's domain. I tried to ignore them, threw myself into my work, but then the disappearances started accelerating. 3 people in 1 week, all in that same area, a family of migrants. Their belongings were found scattered in a pattern that looked random to anyone who hadn't been in the collector's chamber, but I recognized it immediately. It was a message, spelled out in abandoned backpacks and water bottles. Come back or more join us. I couldn't let more people be taken. That night, I drove back to Sector 779. The moon was full this time, casting sharp shadows across the desert landscape. I found the spot where I'd originally discovered the tunnel entrance. The wooden planks were back in place, undisturbed. I pulled them up and shone my light down. The tunnel extended into darkness, not ending at 5 feet like the reports claimed. Either it changed based on who was looking, or it only opened for those the collector had marked. I descended. The tunnel was exactly as I remembered it, ancient railroad ties and all. But this time I noticed something new. Scratch marks on the walls, desperate messages carved into the wood. Help, God save us. 1887, cannot escape, he sees all. The chamber with the belongings was unchanged, but now I could feel them, the essence of their owners still clinging to each object. Cordelia's presence was strongest, probably because I carried her wallet. It was like she was guiding me deeper into the tunnel system. You returned, the collector said, appearing from the shadows. It seemed unsurprised. They always return. I came to make a deal, I said. Oh, the collector's shifting features settled into something resembling curiosity. What could you possibly offer me? Myself. I'll join your collection willingly. No resistance if you release the others. It laughed, that horrible sound of grinding stone. You misunderstand your position, Agent Blackwood. I don't need your permission to collect you. And I never release anyone. They are mine, forever. Then I'll destroy you. With what? Your gun? Your human strength? I've existed for 3 centuries. I am beyond your physical reality, but I'd come prepared. In my research, I'd found something in those old Apache legends. The Keeper of the Lost had one weakness. It was bound to its collection. Destroy the belongings, scatter them beyond recovery, and the connection between the collector and the collected would break. I pulled out the incendiary grenade I'd stolen from the Border Patrol armory. Phosphorus burns at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to turn all those belongings to ash. The collector's form rippled with what looked like fear. You wouldn't. You'd destroy their only link to the world. They'd be truly lost forever. Or they'd be free. You don't know that. You could be condemning them to something worse than collection. I hesitated. It was right. I didn't know what would happen. But then I heard them, all the collected, their voices whispering in unison. Do it. Please, do it. I pulled the pin. The collector lunged at me with inhuman speed, but I'd already thrown the grenade into the midst of the belongings. The explosion was immediate and devastating. White hot phosphorus scattered across the chamber, igniting everything it touched. Wallets, photos, jewelry, toys, centuries of collected memories burning in seconds. The collector screamed, a sound that wasn't just audible but physical, shaking the entire tunnel system. Its form began to unravel, those shifting features cycling through every face it had ever collected, faster and faster until they blurred into static. What have you done? It wailed. They're lost. All lost. But then something miraculous happened. The cavern with the preserved bodies began to glow. One by one, the collected started to move. Really move. Not just those tiny twitches. They stepped down from their alcoves, their bodies becoming translucent, then transparent. Rebecca Marsh walked up to me, her form already fading. "Thank you," she said. And for the first time, she was really smiling. "We're free." Morrison was there too, and hundreds of others. They all looked peaceful, relieved, ready. One by one, they dissolved into points of light that rose through the ceiling and vanished. The collector was on its knees now, its form breaking apart like old parchment in water. "My collection," it whispered, "my purpose. What am I without them?" "Human," I said. "You're human again." As the last of the collected faded away, I saw the collector's true form for the first time. Not a monster, but a man. Old, withered, dressed in the remnants of conquistador armor. He looked up at me with eyes that were brown and terrified and very, very tired. "I remember," he gasped. "I remember my name. Diego Mendoza. I came here seeking gold in 1698. I found something else. It offered me eternal life to be its servant, its collector. I thought I was blessed. I was cursed. The cavern was beginning to collapse. The phosphorus fire had weakened the supports, and without the collector's power holding it together, the whole system was failing. "Go," Diego said. "Leave me. Let me finally die. It's 3 centuries overdue." I ran. The tunnel was collapsing behind me, centuries of carefully maintained passages returning to nature in seconds. I barely made it to the ladder, scrambled up as the wooden rungs splintered beneath my weight. I erupted from the entrance just as the entire area caved in, creating a massive sinkhole that swallowed the wooden planks and any trace of the tunnel system. A cloud of ancient dust rose into the night air, carrying with it what looked like tiny points of light. The last traces of the collected, finally free. I sat there in the desert until dawn, watching the sinkhole, making sure nothing climbed out. As the sun rose, I saw him one last time, Diego Mendoza, standing at the edge of the depression, but not the monster he'd been. He looked like a normal man, translucent in the morning light. "Thank you," he said, though no sound came out. Then he turned and walked, into the sunrise, fading with each step until he was gone. The sinkhole was investigated, of course. They found natural cave systems, some old wooden supports that were carbon dated to the late 1800s, and bones. Lots of bones from different time periods. The anthropologists were excited. Evidence of centuries of human habitation. They had no idea they were looking at the remains of the collector's victims, finally released from their preservation. I never told anyone the full truth. Filed a report about finding an old tunnel system that collapsed, possibly connected to historical disappearances. They commended me for the discovery, gave me a medal for contributing to archaeological knowledge. Lysander Nightingale noticed the change in me, though. "You seem lighter," he said one day, "like you figured something out." "Yeah," I said, "I did." The dream stopped after that night. No more visions of the collected, no more calls back to the desert. But I kept Cordelia Ravencrest's wallet. Her family had long since given up hope, moved on with their lives. But I tracked down her sister, now in her 60s, living in Albuquerque. I stood at the door of a modest adobe house in Albuquerque, Cordelia Ravencrest's wallet weighing heavy in my pocket. The woman who answered was in her 60s, gray-haired, but with eyes that were unmistakably similar to those in Cordelia's driver's license photo. "Mrs. Elaine Morrison?" I asked, using her married name. "Yes? I'm Agent Percival Blackwood with Border Patrol. I have something that belonged to your sister." Her hand went to her mouth. Even after 22 years, the wound was still raw. She invited me in, served coffee with shaking hands, and sat across from me in a living room filled with family photos, including several of a young Cordelia. I handed her the wallet. She opened it carefully as if it might disappear, and when she saw her sister's license, she broke down crying. "Where did you find this?" she asked through tears. "In a cave system near the border. It recently collapsed, but we found various personal effects from missing persons cases. I thought you should have this. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough." "Did you find her?" "We found remains," I said gently. "Very old. The archaeological team believes the people there passed peacefully. No signs of violence." She nodded, clutching the wallet. She was running from an ex-boyfriend. Abusive. She thought she could start fresh in Mexico, find work at one of the resorts. She spoke fluent Spanish, you know. Our grandmother was from Chihuahua. She sounds like she was brave. She was. Brave and kind and full of life. Elaine looked at me with those eyes so like her sister's. Thank you for bringing this back. After all these years, to have something of hers, it helps. I wanted to tell her more, that Cordelia had helped guide me through the tunnels, that she was free now, finally at peace, that in those last moments before she faded into light she'd looked happy. But I couldn't. "There's something else," Elaine said suddenly. "This might sound crazy, but 2 nights ago, I had the strangest dream. Cordelia was in it, looking exactly like she did when she disappeared. She said she was okay, that she was finally going home. She said someone had helped her. She studied my face. That was you, wasn't it? Somehow, that was you." I couldn't speak, just nodded. "I don't understand how, and I don't need to. But thank you. Thank you for helping her come home." I left Albuquerque that afternoon, but I kept thinking about all the other families who would never get that closure. The archaeological team had found remains, but most were too old or damaged to identify. Hundreds of families would never know that their loved ones had finally been freed. Back at work, I threw myself into my duties with renewed purpose. Every life saved at the border felt like a small victory against the darkness that had claimed so many. But Sector 779 remained largely abandoned. Other agents reported feeling uneasy there, though they couldn't explain why. The official report blamed it on the instability caused by the sinkhole, but I knew better. The land remembered what had happened there. 3 months after the incident, I received a package at my apartment. No return address, but postmarked from Phoenix. Inside was a leather journal, old and weathered. The first page had a note in Anthony Vasquez's handwriting. "Blackwood, found this in Doug's things." His wife had kept it but never read it, thought you should have it. "You succeeded where he failed." A.V. The journal was Douglas Rourke's account of his encounters with the collector, far more detailed than his official report. But the last entry, dated just days before his suicide, was different. March 15th, 1987. "The dreams have changed. They're not calling me back anymore. They're thanking me. I see them sometimes, free, moving on to wherever souls go when they're finally released. But I also see him, the collector. He stands at the edge of my vision, waiting. He says I belong to him now, that by entering his domain 3 times, I've become part of his collection whether he takes me or not. I can feel myself fading, becoming less real every day. Mary doesn't notice yet, but she will. I'm becoming like them, trapped between worlds. There's only one way to prevent it, to stay myself, to stay human. I'm sorry, Mary. This is the only way to stay free." I understood then why Rourke had chosen death over what he was becoming. The collector's influence didn't end just because you escaped. It lingered, pulled at you, tried to draw you into that between space. But I felt none of that. No pull, no fading, no dreams calling me back. By destroying the collection, I'd broken not just the collector's hold on the collected, but its ability to claim new victims. Diego Mendoza was truly gone, and his curse with him. Or so I thought. It was 6 months later when things took another turn. I was on a routine patrol, alone, checking sensors along a remote section of fence. The sun was setting, painting the desert in those deep reds and purples that make it look like another planet. That's when I saw her, a young woman standing perfectly still about 50 yards away. She wore modern clothes, but there was something off about how she stood, too rigid, too perfect. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area," I called out, approaching carefully. She turned to face me and my blood froze. Her eyes were solid black, just like the Collected, but that was impossible. I'd freed them all. "Agent Blackwood," she said, her voice carrying despite the distance. "You destroyed the old Collector, but nature abhors a vacuum. Who are you?" "I am what fills the empty space. Someone must tend to the lost. Someone must remember the forgotten. The desert chose me, just as it chose Diego Mendoza 3 centuries ago." "No," I said, reaching for my radio, "not again." "It's different this time," she said, and suddenly she was right in front of me, having covered 50 yards in a blink. "I learned from the old Collector's mistakes. I don't trap them. I don't preserve them against their will. I simply guide them." "Guide them where?" "Beyond, to whatever comes after. The old Collector hoarded them, kept them like trophies. I'm more of a ferryman. The desert still claims lives, Agent Blackwood, it always will. But now, instead of being collected, they're helped to move on." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're part of this now. You destroyed the old system and helped create the new one. The desert remembers you, respects you. It wants you to know that the lost are in better hands now." She started to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and Agent Blackwood?" Cordelia says, "Thank you." They all do. Then she was gone, vanished into the desert twilight like smoke. I never saw her again, but I heard stories. Other agents reported finding lost migrants who swore a woman with black eyes had guided them to safety. Bodies of those who didn't make it were found in places where they could be easily discovered and returned to their families, instead of being lost forever. The disappearances in Sector 779 stopped completely. I kept Rourke's journal and added my own entries, documenting everything that had happened. Someday, someone else might need to know the truth about what lurks in the spaces between the known and unknown. 5 years have passed since that night in the Collector's chamber. I'm still with Border Patrol, still working the same stretches of desert. But I see it differently now. Every shadow could hide a doorway to another realm. Every unexplained disappearance might be something more than simple misfortune. And somewhere out there, a new guardian walks the line between worlds, one who guides rather than collects. I think about Diego Mendoza sometimes, the conquistador who became a monster, then became human again, just long enough to die. 3 centuries of existence, and in the end, all he wanted was release. I wonder if he knew what he was becoming when he made that deal, or if the transformation was so gradual he didn't notice until it was too late. Lysander Nightingale became my regular patrol partner after everything that happened. He never asked about that night again, but sometimes I catch him looking at me strangely, especially when we pass through Sector 779. The sinkhole has been filled in, declared safe, but neither of us lingers there. "You know," he said one evening as we watched the sunset over the desert, "there are more things out here than we're trained to handle." "Yeah," I agreed. "And you've seen them. Really seen them." "Yeah." "Does it get easier, knowing what's really out there?" I thought about it for a moment. "No, but it makes the job feel more important. We're not just guards or law enforcement. We're the line between the known world and everything else." He nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. Last month, I received another package. This one had no postmark at all, just appeared on my desk one morning. Inside was a photo, old, black and white, dated 1898 on the back. It showed a group of people standing in front of what looked like a mine entrance. In the center was a young Spanish man in conquistador armor that looked already ancient. His eyes, even in the old photo, seemed deeply sad. On the back, in spidery handwriting, Diego Mendoza before the collection began. He was just looking for gold. Remember that even monsters were human once. A friend. I framed the photo and kept it in my office. A reminder that the border between human and inhuman is thinner than we think, and that sometimes the most important part of the job isn't catching people trying to cross borders, but understanding that some borders were never meant to be crossed at all. The desert keeps its secrets, but sometimes if you're very unlucky or very brave, it shares them with you. And once you know them, you can never unknow them. You can only hope that when your time comes to cross that final border, someone kind is waiting on the other side to guide you home. Every now and then, when I'm alone on patrol and the moon is dark, I think I see them. Brief glimpses of the collected, not trapped anymore but visiting, checking on the world they left behind. Morrison waves from a distant ridge. Rebecca Marsh smiles from the shadow of a saguaro cactus. And Cordelia Ravencrest, young forever in my memory, stands at the edge of my vision, pointing not toward danger but away from it, still helping, still guiding, still brave. The official reports list the Sector 779 incident as a geological event that led to the discovery of historical remains. The truth is buried deeper than any government file, living only in the memories of those who were there, and in the pages of journals that will never see official scrutiny. But the families of the missing know something changed. They feel it in their dreams, in the sudden sense of closure that comes without explanation, in the feeling that their loved ones are finally at peace. They don't need to know about collectors and chambers and deals made in the dark. They just need to know that someone cared enough to set their lost ones free. I still patrol the border. I still do my job. But now I know that job is bigger than just enforcing laws and checking documents. It's about standing watch at the edge of reality, making sure that what lurks in the between spaces stays there, or at least doesn't take more than its share. The new Guardian seems to understand this balance. The desert still claims lives. It always will in a place this harsh and unforgiving. But now those lives end. They don't linger in perpetual preservation. It's a grim comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. Sometimes rookies ask me about the strange reports from Sector 779, about the sinkhole and the remains, and the stories that don't quite add up. I tell them what I tell everyone. The desert is full of mysteries, and some of them are better left unsolved. But to you, reading this account, I tell the truth. There are things in the wasteland that defy explanation, entities that exist in the spaces between what we know and what we fear. Most people will never encounter them. But for those who do, remember this. Even the darkest powers can be broken. Even the most ancient curses can be lifted. And sometimes the greatest act of heroism is simply setting the trapped souls free. The collector is gone. The collected are free. And somewhere in the space between this world and the next, 537 souls are finally at rest. No longer preserved in that terrible gallery. No longer forgotten. That has to be enough. Even if the nightmares never fully stop, even if the desert never lets me forget what I've seen, knowing they're free has to be enough. Because in the end, that's all any of us want, to be remembered, to matter, and eventually to be allowed to let go. My name is Agent Algernon Crowley, and before you ask, yes, that's my real name. My parents were literature professors with a twisted sense of humor. I've been working Border Patrol for 15 years, mostly along the Arizona-California border where the Sonoran Desert meets the Colorado Desert. It's a place where the land itself seems hostile to human life, where temperatures can swing 60 degrees between day and night, and where people have been disappearing without explanation since long before we started keeping records. The incident I'm about to describe occurred in early February of this year, starting with what should have been a routine investigation of unusual lights reported by multiple witnesses. By the time it ended, I would question everything I thought I knew about the nature of reality and the thin line between the living and the dead. It began at 11:23 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was manning the station with Agent Cassius Ironwood when the first call came in. Border Patrol Station 7, this is Agent Crowley. The voice on the other end was shaking, barely coherent. There are lights? God, there are so many lights. And people, but they're not moving. They're just standing there. Sir, calm down. What's your location? I'm at mile marker 42 on Highway 98, about 3 miles from the Ocotillo wind farm. Please, you have to come. Something's wrong with these people. The line went dead. I tried calling back, but got nothing. Then, within minutes, 3 more calls came in from different people, all reporting strange lights and motionless figures in the desert near the same area. We should check it out, Ironwood said. He was a veteran like me, had seen his share of strange things in the desert. When multiple civilians call in about the same thing, it's usually worth investigating. We drove out in separate vehicles, standard protocol for unknown situations. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the absence of light pollution. As we approached mile marker 42, I could see what the callers meant about lights. There were dozens of them, soft blue-white orbs floating about 10 feet off the ground, arranged in a perfect grid pattern that extended maybe a quarter mile into the desert. You seeing this, Crowley? Ironwood's voice crackled over the radio. Copy that. I count at least 40 lights, no visible source. We pulled over near an abandoned pickup truck, presumably belonging to our first caller. The driver's door was open, engine still running, but no one was inside. I grabbed my flashlight and rifle, then stepped out into the cold desert air. That's when I saw them. Standing in perfect rows between the floating lights were people, men, women, even a few children. All perfectly still, facing the same direction, north, toward something I couldn't see in the darkness. They were dressed normally, like they'd just walked out of their homes, or stopped during a journey. Some wore backpacks, others carried water jugs. One woman held a baby, frozen mid-step like she'd been turned to stone. "Federal agents," I called out. "Is anyone injured? Does anyone need assistance?" No response, not even a twitch. Ironwood approached from the other side, his flashlight beam playing across the frozen figures. "This is wrong, Algernon. This is really wrong." I walked up to the nearest figure, a man in his 30s wearing jeans and a Phoenix Suns t-shirt. His eyes were open, staring straight ahead, not even reacting when I waved my hand in front of his face. I checked for a pulse. It was there, slow but steady. He was breathing, barely perceptible but definite. He was alive, just frozen. "They're in some kind of trance," I reported to Ironwood. "This one's alive but completely unresponsive." We counted 37 people standing in the desert, all in the same state. The floating lights hummed softly, a sound just at the edge of perception, like electrical current through water. When I tried to approach one of the lights, my radio exploded with static and my flashlight flickered. "We need backup," Ironwood said. "And medical. Lots of medical." I was heading back to my vehicle to make the call when I saw her. A woman standing apart from the others, but she was facing us, not north like the rest. She was moving, barely, just a slight swaying, like she was fighting against whatever held the others. "Ma'am!" I ran toward her. "Are you okay?" What happened here? As I got closer, I could see she was struggling to speak, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. Her eyes were terrified, darting between me and something behind me. I turned, but saw only more frozen people and floating lights. Then, finally, she managed to whisper, "Don't look at it." "Look at what?" "The thing. They're watching." I followed the gaze of the frozen people, squinting into the darkness beyond the lights. At first, I saw nothing. Then my eyes adjusted, and I wished to God they hadn't. Standing maybe 100 yards away was something that shouldn't exist. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but wrong in every possible way. Too tall, maybe 12 feet, with limbs that bent in too many places. Its skin looked like oil, black and reflective, constantly shifting and flowing. But the worst part was its face. Or what should have been a face. Instead, there was a void, an absence that hurt to perceive, like looking at a hole in reality itself. The moment I saw it, I understood why everyone was frozen. Looking at it was like having your mind grabbed and held in place. I felt my muscles locking up, my thoughts slowing down, everything in me wanting to just stand there and stare at this impossible thing. "Crowley!" Ironwood's voice snapped me out of it. He grabbed my shoulder, spun me around. "Don't look at it. Whatever you do, don't look directly at it." But he'd seen it too. I could tell from his expression, the way his hands were shaking. We'd both glimpsed something that our brains couldn't properly process. "We need to get these people out of here," I said, though I had no idea how. We tried physically moving them, but they were rigid as statues. Even working together, we couldn't budge the smallest of them. They were somehow anchored in place, held by something more than just their own locked muscles. That's when Ophelia Thornfield arrived. I'd never seen her before, but she pulled up in a beat-up Jeep like she owned the place, stepping out with the confidence of someone who dealt with impossible things regularly. She was in her 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing civilian clothes but carrying herself like former military. "Agents Crowley and Ironwood, I presume?" she said, not waiting for confirmation. "I'm Dr. Ophelia Thornfield, xenopsychologist. I've been tracking these incidents for 3 years." "These incidents?" Ironwood asked. "This has happened before?" 7 times that I know of, across 3 states. Never this many people, though. Usually it's 5 or 6 at most. She pulled out what looked like a modified tablet with additional sensors attached. "The entity you're refusing to look at, good instinct, by the way, is what I call a witness." "A witness to what?" "We don't know. But they appear, people look at them, and they get stuck in a feedback loop. Their consciousness gets trapped, staring at something their brain can't comprehend. The lucky ones eventually break free when the witness leaves. The unlucky ones." She gestured to the frozen people. "They can stay like this for days, weeks. The longest recorded was 3 months. 3 months? I couldn't hide my shock. How did they survive? They didn't, not all of them. The human body can only go so long without proper food and water, even in this state. We've lost 12 people across the previous incidents." I looked at the 37 frozen figures with new horror. "We need to break them free." "I'm working on that," Thornfield said, adjusting her equipment. "The witnesses seem to be attracted to certain electromagnetic frequencies. I've been developing a disruption field that might—" Her device suddenly screamed an alarm. She looked at the screen and paled. "What is it?" Ironwood asked. "There's not just one witness," she whispered. "There are 3. I turned slowly, careful not to look directly at anything, and saw them. 3 of those impossible figures, standing at equidistant points around the frozen people, forming a triangle. The floating lights pulsed in rhythm with some unheard heartbeat. "This is unprecedented," Thornfield breathed. "They've never appeared in groups before." The woman who'd warned me earlier let out a strangled cry. She was fighting harder now, her whole body trembling with effort. "Help! Them!" She gasped. "They're showing us something horrible." "What are they showing you?" Thornfield asked urgently, moving closer with her equipment. "The end. Everyone. Standing. Still. Forever. Whole. World. Frozen." Then she went rigid, her eyes glazing over, joining the others in their frozen vigil. "We need to evacuate the area," Ironwood said. "Call in everyone. Set up a perimeter." "No," Thornfield interrupted. "More people will just mean more victims. The witnesses create a field of influence. Anyone who enters and looks at them gets caught. Then how do we free these people?" She pulled out a set of what looked like welding goggles, but the lenses were covered with intricate patterns. "Filtered viewing. It breaks up the visual pattern that causes the paralysis. I only have 3 pairs." She handed one to me and one to Ironwood. When I put them on, the world looked fractured, like looking through a kaleidoscope. But I could see the witnesses now without feeling that mental grip. They were even more terrifying when fully visible, their bodies constantly shifting between states. Sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, always wrong. "The theory," Thornfield explained, "is that they're not from our dimensional space. They exist partially here, partially elsewhere. When people look at them directly, their consciousness gets pulled partially into that other space, trapping them between dimensions. So, how do we get them back? We need to make the witnesses leave. They never stay more than a few hours, but with 3 of them..." She shook her head. "I don't know what they're doing. This is organized, purposeful. They're not just randomly appearing anymore." I noticed something else through the filtered goggles. Thin lines of light connected each frozen person to the nearest witness, like threads of energy being drawn from them. "They're feeding on them," I said. "Look, there are connections." Thornfield aimed her equipment at the lights. "You're right. Energy transfer of some kind. They're harvesting something from these people." "Their consciousness?" Ironwood suggested. "Or their potential futures," Thornfield said quietly. "In my research, I've found that people who survive these encounters often report the same thing. They feel like years of their life have been stolen, like they've lost possibilities they can't quite remember." One of the witnesses moved. It didn't walk. It just existed in a different location. Suddenly, 20 feet closer to our position. The frozen people moved with it, maintaining their perfect formation, sliding across the desert floor without taking a step. "They're herding them," I realized, "moving them somewhere." "North," Ironwood said. "They're all facing north." We looked in that direction. In the distance, barely visible even through the goggles, was a massive structure that hadn't been there before. It looked like a pyramid made of the same flowing black oil substance as the witnesses, easily 300 feet tall. "That's new," Thornfield said, her voice tight with fear. "They've never built anything before." More lights were appearing in the desert, dozens of them, then hundreds, and beneath each light more people were arriving. Not walking, just appearing, already frozen in place. I recognized some of them from missing persons reports. People who'd vanished weeks ago, months ago, some even years ago. "Where are they coming from?" Ironwood demanded. "Stored," Thornfield said. her equipment going crazy with readings. They've been collecting people, storing them somewhere, and now they're bringing them all here. This isn't random anymore. This is an invasion. The next hour was the longest of my life. We watched helplessly as more and more people materialized in the desert, all frozen in that same horrible stance, all facing the growing pyramid structure. By Thornfield's count, there were now over 300 people arranged in perfect concentric circles around the three witnesses. "I need to contact my team," Thornfield said, pulling out a satellite phone. "They need to know this is escalating." While she made her calls, Ironwood and I tried to document everything we could see through our filtered goggles. The pyramid was growing taller by the minute, its surface rippling like liquid but maintaining its shape. Strange symbols appeared and disappeared on its surface, not quite writing, but patterns that suggested meaning just beyond comprehension. "Algernon," Ironwood said quietly, "look at the formation, the way they're arranged." I looked again at the frozen people. They weren't just in circles, they were in a specific pattern. 3 interlocking spirals, each originating from one of the witnesses and meeting at the center where the pyramid stood. It looked almost like a mathematical equation written in human bodies. "It's a summoning circle," I said, the realization hitting me cold. They're using these people as components in some kind of ritual. Summoning what? Before I could answer, one of the frozen people, a young boy, couldn't have been more than 10, began to speak. His mouth moved mechanically, his voice flat and emotionless. The convergence approaches. 2 worlds become one. The still shall inherit the earth. Then another spoke, an elderly woman. Resistance is insignificant. Observation is participation. Participation is surrender. One by one, they all began to speak. Hundreds of voices creating a horrible chorus. "We are the witnessed. We are the watching. We are the waiting." The door opens at the 13th hour. The sleepers wake. The movers freeze. Balance will be restored. Thornfield ran back to us, her face pale. My teams detected similar events happening globally. Beijing, London, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, everywhere. Thousands of people frozen. Witnesses appearing in groups. Structures being built. "It's coordinated," I said. "This isn't random anymore. It's an invasion." "We need to disrupt it," Ironwood said. "Break their concentration, scatter the people somehow." "Any disruption could kill them," Thornfield warned. "Their consciousness is partially displaced. Shocking them back could cause permanent damage, but we were running out of time. The pyramid was now complete, and something was happening at its apex. The air itself was tearing, revealing glimpses of another place, a world where everything was still, where buildings stood like frozen waterfalls, where the sky was a solid mass of unmoving clouds. "That's their world," Thornfield breathed. "A universe where entropy won, where all motion ceased. They're trying to merge it with ours." The 3 witnesses began to move, gliding toward the pyramid. As they did, the frozen people moved with them, maintaining formation. But I noticed something. A few of them were fighting it. Their eyes moved independently of their heads, tears streaming down frozen faces. They were still in there, still aware, still terrified. "We have to try something," I said. "Anything." That's when I remembered the woman who'd fought the paralysis initially. She'd managed to speak to warn us. There had to be something different about her, something that gave her resistance. I found her in the crowd, still frozen, but positioned slightly out of alignment with the others. Through the goggles, I could see her energy thread to the witness was thinner, more tenuous. "Thornfield, look at this one. Her connection is weaker." Thornfield scanned her with the equipment. "You're right. Her brainwave patterns are different. She's naturally resistant somehow." She adjusted her device. "If I can replicate her frequency, broadcast it." "Do it," I said. She began adjusting her equipment, but the witnesses noticed. All three turned toward us simultaneously, their void faces somehow expressing malevolence despite having no features. "They know we're here," Ironwood said, raising his rifle instinctively, though we all knew bullets would be useless. One witness began moving toward us. Even through the filtered goggles, looking at it directly was difficult. Reality seemed to bend around it, space warping like heat mirages. The frozen people it controlled moved with it, creating a wave of humanity sliding across the desert. "Almost there," Thornfield muttered, fingers flying over her device. "Just need another minute." The witness reached out with one impossible arm, stretching across 30 feet of space without moving its body. Ironwood pushed Thornfield aside just as the arm swept through where she'd been standing. Where it passed, the desert sand turned to glass, frozen in rippling patterns. "Keep working," I shouted, grabbing a flare from my belt. I lit it and threw it at the witness. The burning phosphorus passed right through it, but the creature recoiled slightly, its attention momentarily diverted. "Got it!" Thornfield shouted. She hit a button on her device, and a pulse of energy erupted outward. The effect was immediate. Several of the frozen people jerked, their connections to the witnesses flickering. A few managed to take steps backward, breaking formation. The woman who'd warned us earlier collapsed to her knees, gasping. But the witnesses adapted quickly. The energy threads strengthened, pulling the escaping people back into formation. All except for the woman. She crawled toward us, every movement clearly agony. "The 13th hour," she gasped. "It's not time, it's people." The 13th person to look. That's me. I was the 13th in my group. I'm the key. "The key to what?" Thornfield asked. "To sending them back. The 13th of each gathering can break the connection. Find the others. Find all the 13ths. I understood. In each spiral of people, we needed to find the 13th person to look at each witness. They would be the ones with the weakest connections, the ones who could potentially break free and disrupt the pattern. "Ironwood, help me count," I said. We began moving through the frozen crowds, counting from the center outward, looking for the 13th position in each spiral. We found them, 3 people, each struggling more than the others, each with that same tenuous connection. A middle-aged man in a business suit, a teenage girl with a backpack, an elderly man with a cane. "We need to wake them up," I said. "Physical shock might work," Thornfield suggested, "but it's dangerous." A new sound cut through the night. Helicopters, military helicopters, approaching fast. "Finally, back up," Ironwood said. But Thornfield looked worried. "No, this is bad. They don't understand what they're dealing with. If they attack the witnesses..." The helicopters opened fire. Tracers lit up the night sky, pouring into the witnesses and the pyramid. The bullets passed harmlessly through the creatures, but the pyramid reacted violently. It pulsed with dark energy, and the tear in reality widened. Through the gap, we could see them, hundreds more witnesses, waiting on the other side, ready to cross over. "They're making it worse," Thornfield shouted. The frozen people began to speak again, but this time it wasn't words. It was screaming. Hundreds of voices in perfect, horrible unison, expressing agony that wasn't their own, but was being channeled through them. The woman who'd broken free grabbed my arm. "The 13ths. You have to wake them now. Physical shock, emotional shock, anything. break their connection before the door opens fully. I ran to the nearest 13th, the teenage girl. Her eyes tracked my movement, pleading. I tried shaking her, but she was rigid as stone. "I'm sorry about this," I said, then pulled out my taser. The shock convulsed through her body. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she gasped, stumbled, and fell out of formation. "It worked!" I shouted. Ironwood was already at the businessman, using his own taser. The man collapsed, but he was free. The elderly man was harder to reach. He was deeper in the formation, surrounded by frozen people. I had to push through them like mannequins, their rigid bodies unnaturally heavy. When I reached him, I hesitated. He was old, frail. The shock might kill him. "Do it," he whispered, somehow managing to speak despite the paralysis. Better dead than this. I used the lowest setting on the taser. He convulsed, fell, but his eyes were clear when he looked up at me. "Thank you," he breathed. With all 3/13ths free, something changed. The perfect formation was broken. The spirals began to collapse as people stumbled out of alignment. Some fell, some ran, some just stood there crying. The witnesses let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream, but made everyone who heard it clutch their heads in pain. The pyramid began to destabilize, its surface rippling chaotically. "It's working," Thornfield shouted. "The pattern's broken. They can't maintain the connection without—" The largest witness moved. Not the slow glide from before, but fast, almost instantaneous. It appeared right in front of Thornfield, reaching for her equipment. I didn't think. I tackled her, pushing her out of the way. The witness's hand, if you could call it that, passed through my shoulder. The pain was indescribable. Not physical pain, but something deeper. It felt like part of my existence was being erased, like memories and possibilities were being torn away. I could feel myself becoming less, becoming still, becoming nothing. "Algernon." Ironwood's voice seemed to come from very far away. Through the growing numbness, I saw the pyramid collapsing, the tear in reality shrinking. The witnesses were being pulled back toward it, their forms becoming less solid. But the one touching me wasn't letting go. "You will be the anchor," it spoke directly into my mind. "Through you, we will return. You will stand watch, you will wait, you will witness our return." I could feel myself changing, my body growing cold and rigid. This was different from what happened to the others. This was permanent. Then the woman who'd first broken free did something I didn't expect. She grabbed the energy disruption device from Thornfield and smashed it against the witness holding me. The device exploded in a burst of electromagnetic energy. The witness reeled back, its form fracturing like a broken mirror. Its grip on me broke, and I collapsed to the ground, gasping. The three witnesses were pulled into the collapsing pyramid, their forms stretching like taffy. The tear in reality snapped shut with a sound like thunder. The pyramid crumbled into black sand that dissolved in the desert wind. And suddenly it was over. The floating lights winked out. The frozen people who hadn't fled stood bewildered, looking around in confusion. Some were asking what year it was, how they'd gotten here, why they couldn't remember anything. I tried to stand, but couldn't. My left arm was completely numb, and when I looked at it, I nearly screamed. It was partially translucent, like glass. I could see through it to the ground below. "Don't move," Thornfield said, scanning me with her equipment. "You're partially displaced. Part of you is stuck between dimensions. Can you fix it?" She didn't answer immediately, which told me everything I needed to know. The military helicopters were landing, soldiers pouring out, setting up a perimeter. Medical teams began treating the confused survivors. But I noticed Thornfield signaling to some of them, pointing at me. They brought a special stretcher, one lined with some kind of metallic mesh. "This will stabilize you," she said. "We have a facility. We've been treating survivors from the previous incidents. Some of them have similar displacement issues." As they loaded me onto the stretcher, I saw Ironwood arguing with a military officer, probably about jurisdiction. The woman who'd saved me was being led away by medics, but she looked back and nodded once. A thank you, maybe, or an acknowledgement of shared survival. "What about the others?" I asked Thornfield. "The other sites globally?" "Most were disrupted when this one failed. The witnesses retreated, but..." She hesitated. "3 sites are still active: Moscow, Cairo, and Sydney. The witnesses there didn't leave. They're digging in, building bigger structures. This isn't over." "No," she agreed. "This was just the first attempt. They'll try again, and next time they'll be ready for our countermeasures." As the helicopter lifted off, carrying me toward whatever treatment awaited, I looked back at the desert. In the moonlight, I could still see the impressions in the sand where hundreds of people had stood frozen. The site would be classified, covered up, explained away as a mass hallucination or gas leak or something equally mundane. But I knew the truth somewhere. In a universe where everything had stopped moving, creatures that shouldn't exist were planning their next attempt. And part of me, the part that was now permanently displaced, could feel them watching, waiting, witnessing. The woman had been right about one thing. I was marked now. The 13th hour hadn't been about time at all. It had been about me, the 13th person to truly see them and survive. And that made me valuable to both sides of a war most people didn't even know was beginning. The facility Thornfield took me to wasn't on any map. Hidden in the mountains of Nevada, it looked like an abandoned mining operation from the outside. Inside, it was a state-of-the-art medical and research center dedicated to what they called dimensional displacement incidents. I wasn't their first patient, not even close. The ward where they kept us could have been in any hospital, except for the subtle differences. The walls were lined with that same metallic mesh that had been on my stretcher. The windows didn't show the outside. They showed a neutral gray space that supposedly existed between dimensions. And the other patients, they were like me, partially here, partially elsewhere. There was a woman named Sarah, whose left leg would phase in and out of visibility. A man called Dutch, who could sometimes see through walls but couldn't control when. A teenager who went by Phoenix, who occasionally existed in 2 places at once, though only one version could speak at a time. "Welcome to the displacement ward," Phoenix said when they brought me in, one version of her sitting on a bed while another stood by the window, also known as the place where physics comes to die. My translucent arm had gotten worse during the helicopter ride. Now my entire left side was see-through, like I was made of foggy glass. The doctors, if that's what they were, ran test after test trying to stabilize my dimensional anchor, as they put it. Dr. Thornfield visited me after the first week. "How are you adjusting?" she asked, though we both knew it wasn't really a question about my comfort. "I can feel them," I said. "The witnesses. They're still there, in that other place, watching, waiting." She nodded, unsurprised. "All the displaced patients report the same thing. You've become a window between worlds. They can see through you, and you can sense them. The sites that are still active, Moscow, Cairo, Sydney, what's happening there?" Her expression darkened. "The structures are growing. The government's tried military intervention, but it only made things worse. The witnesses there have adapted. They're not trying to bring people to them anymore. They're spreading the stillness outward." "What do you mean?" She pulled out a tablet, showing me satellite footage of Moscow. A perfect circle of absolute stillness, about a mile in diameter, surrounded the pyramid structure. Everything within it was frozen. People, vehicles, even birds in mid-flight. "It's expanding by about 10 feet every hour," she said. "At this rate, Moscow will be completely frozen within 3 months. Can't you disrupt it like we did?" "We've tried. The 13th person theory worked once, but they've adapted. Now they take people in groups of 12 or 14, never 13. They learned from our interference." I stared at the footage, watching the circle of stillness creep outward like ice forming on a pond. There has to be a way to stop them. "That's why I'm here," Thornfield said. "You have a unique connection to them now. You might be able to communicate with them, understand what they want." "I already know what they want. They want our world to be like theirs, still, frozen, dead. But why? What's the purpose?" That night, I found out. The dreams started as soon as I fell asleep, but they weren't really dreams. They were communications. I was standing in that other world, the one I'd glimpsed through the tear in reality. Everything was exactly as I'd seen, buildings like frozen waterfalls, clouds like solid sculptures, a world where nothing had moved for eons. A witness stood before me, but here in its own world it looked different. More solid, more real, almost human, if humans were made of living shadow. "You can hear us now," it said, its voice like whispers overlapping. "Good. Understanding is necessary." Understanding what? "Why are you doing this? Look around you." This was our world, beautiful, perfect, ordered, until the motion began. The scene shifted, and I saw their world as it had been, or would be. Time worked differently here. It was alive, vibrant, full of beings like the witnesses, but brighter, more colorful. They moved through their cities like flowing light. "We discovered the secret of perfect stillness," the witness explained. "The ultimate peace. No change, no decay, no death. We thought it was evolution." "But it was suicide," I said, understanding. "We didn't know." The stillness spread like a virus. Those who achieved it couldn't be changed back. They became anchors, pulling everything around them into stasis. Within a generation, our entire world was frozen. We became the last moving things in a still universe. "So, you want to do the same to our world?" "No. We want to escape. But we can't exist in your world of constant motion without anchors. We need stillness to survive, but not total stillness. Balance. The frozen people. Temporary anchors. We take small groups, create pockets of stillness, just enough to exist in your world for short periods. But it's not sustainable. We need permanent solutions. Like me. You and the other displaced. You exist between motion and stillness. You're bridges. Through you, we could coexist. Your motion, our stillness, in balance." I woke up gasping. My entire left side was now completely transparent, and I could see through it to the bed below. But more disturbing, I could see shadows moving within that transparency, witnesses, using me as a window. I immediately told Thornfield everything. She listened intently, taking notes. "Coexistence," she mused. "They're not invaders. They're refugees. Refugees who freeze people and build pyramids. Because they don't know how else to communicate. Their very presence causes stillness. It's not malicious, it's their nature." Agent Ironwood arrived the next day. He looked tired, older somehow, like the week since the incident had aged him years. "The situation's escalating," he said without preamble. "The president's considering nuclear options for the 3 active sites." "That won't work," Thornfield protested. "The witnesses exist partially in another dimension. Nuclear weapons would just irradiate the frozen zones without affecting them. Then, what do you suggest? I spoke up. Communication. Real communication, not just taking people. They want to escape their world, but they need our help to do it safely. Ironwood looked at my translucent arm skeptically. You want to negotiate with entities that turn people into statues? They're desperate. Their world is dying. No, it's worse than dying. It's stuck in eternal nothing. They'll negotiate if we offer them something better than invasion. It took 3 days of arguing, but eventually Thornfield convinced the higher-ups to let us try. The plan was simple in concept, nearly impossible in execution. We would create a controlled zone where the witnesses could exist without freezing everything around them. A reservation of sorts, where the rules of physics could be bent enough to accommodate both motion and stillness. The location chosen was an abandoned town in the Arizona desert, evacuated decades ago due to groundwater contamination. Perfect for our purposes, isolated, unpopulated, and already forgotten by most maps. I was the key to the plan. My displacement made me a natural translator between worlds, but using me as a conduit would likely make my condition worse. There was a real possibility I would become completely displaced, lost between dimensions forever. I understand the risks, I told Thornfield as they prepared me for the procedure. No, she said quietly, I don't think you do. The other displaced patients who've tried this, we lost them. Not dead, just gone. Existing everywhere and nowhere at once. Then why are you letting me do it? Because if we don't find a solution, Moscow, Cairo, and Sydney will be completely frozen within months. And after that, they'll try again somewhere else, and again, until either we're all frozen or they're all destroyed. They took me to the abandoned town, Carrion Creek, though the name seemed ominous given the circumstances. The military had set up a perimeter 5 miles out. Scientists had installed equipment I didn't understand, designed by Thornfield's team to create what they called a dimensional soft zone. At the center of town, they'd built a platform surrounded by the metallic mesh that stabilized dimensional displacement. I was strapped to a chair in the middle, dozens of sensors attached to monitor my vital signs. We're going to open a controlled portal, Thornfield explained. Small, stable, just enough for communication. You'll be the anchor point, keeping it from expanding. And if I can't hold it? She didn't answer. The process began at sunset. The scientists activated their machines and reality began to bend around me. My transparent side started to glow, the shadows within it becoming more distinct. I could feel the barrier between worlds thinning. Then it opened. Not a tier like before, but a doorway, clean and controlled. Through it, I could see the witnesses' world in all its terrible stillness. 3 of them stood at the threshold waiting. Speak to them, Thornfield's voice came through the speakers. Make the offer. I reached out with my transparent hand, crossing the threshold between worlds. The lead witness touched it with its shadow appendage, and suddenly we weren't just communicating. We were connected. I felt its desperation, centuries of existence in a frozen world, watching their universe die by degrees. But I also felt its hope, the possibility of escape, of redemption. We offer you sanctuary, I said, both aloud and through our connection. This town, 30 square miles, dimensional fluctuation allowing you to exist without freezing everything. In exchange, you release all frozen humans and stop expanding the still zones. The witness consulted with the others, their communication instantaneous and silent. Then, not enough. We number in thousands. This space would hold hundreds at most. It's a start. Prove you can coexist peacefully and we'll create more zones. There are abandoned places all over the world. We can make space for all of you, eventually. And the humans we've taken, released. All of them, immediately. Another long pause. Then, we need guarantees. Treaties. Your governments have a history of breaking promises to refugees. I couldn't argue with that. Then, we'll need observers. Displaced humans like me, who can exist in both worlds, who can ensure both sides keep their promises. You would volunteer for this? I looked at my transparent arm, at the shadows moving within it. I was already halfway between worlds. I already am. The lead witness extended more of itself through the portal, and I felt the temperature drop. Frost formed on the equipment despite the desert heat, but it stopped before reaching the scientists, showing restraint. We accept these terms provisionally. We will release half the frozen humans as a show of good faith. When the first sanctuary zone is fully established, we'll release the rest. All of them, I insisted. Now. That's non-negotiable. The connection between us pulsed with frustration, but also understanding. They knew they were in no position to make demands. Very well, but we choose 100 of our kind to cross over immediately. They will help establish the zone and serve as proof of our intentions. I looked back at Thornfield, who was frantically consulting with someone on her headset. After a tense moment, she nodded. Agreed, I said. The witness withdrew slightly, then spoke one more time. You should know, human, that this connection we share is permanent. You will always be part of both worlds now. Is this acceptable? I thought of Agent Morrison in the first incident, disappeared without a trace. Of Cordelia Ravencrest, lost in the desert. Of all the people who'd vanished over the years, frozen between dimensions or lost entirely. If my permanent displacement could prevent others from suffering the same fate, it's acceptable. The moment I agreed, I felt the change. My transparent side solidified slightly, but now I could see both worlds simultaneously through it. The desert and the still world, overlapped like double-exposed film. I existed fully in neither, but partially in both. The witnesses began to cross over, moving slowly, carefully. Each one that entered our world caused a small pocket of stillness around it, but the dimensional fluctuation field contained it, preventing it from spreading. 100 shadows flowing into the abandoned town, taking up residence in empty buildings. Simultaneously, around the world, the frozen people began to wake up. The pyramids in Moscow, Cairo, and Sydney crumbled. The still zones stopped expanding, then shrank, then disappeared entirely. Thousands of people who'd been trapped in stasis suddenly found themselves free, confused but alive. It wasn't perfect. Many of the formerly frozen reported missing time, gaps in memory, nightmares about being trapped. Some, like me, remained partially displaced. But they were alive, they were free, and they were home. The first sanctuary zone, officially designated as Dimensional Refugee Site Alpha, though everyone just called it Witness Town, was established within a month. The abandoned buildings were retrofitted with dimensional stabilizers. The witnesses took up residence, learning to coexist with human observers. I became the first official dimensional liaison, my displacement making me uniquely suited to mediate between the two species. Other displaced individuals volunteered as well, creating a small core of people who could walk between worlds. 6 months had passed since the establishment of Witness Town, and I barely recognized myself anymore. The left side of my body remained translucent, a permanent window between worlds. Through it, I could see the still dimension overlaying our reality like a ghost image. Some days, I wondered which world I belonged to more. The integration process hadn't been smooth. There had been incidents. A witness accidentally freezing a food delivery truck that got too close to the town. A group of protesters demanding the aliens be expelled. A displaced human losing control and existing in 17 places simultaneously before we managed to stabilize her. But we were learning. I was in my office, a modified trailer at the edge of Witness Town that existed partially in both dimensions, when Cassius Ironwood arrived. He looked better than he had 6 months ago, the stress lines around his eyes softening slightly. "Monthly check-in?" I asked, though we both knew he came by more often than required. "Something like that." He sat across from me, studying my translucent side with the same mix of concern and fascination he always showed. "How are you holding up, Algernon?" "Still here." "Mostly." He didn't laugh at the weak joke. "Thornfield's worried about you. She says your displacement is progressing." I looked at my transparent hand. He was right. The edges were less defined than they had been a month ago, spreading like ink in water. "It's the price of communication," I said. "Every time I interface with the witnesses, I lose a little more of my anchor to this world. There has to be another way." "There isn't." I cut him off. "Trust me, we've looked. The other displaced have tried, but I'm the only one who can maintain extended contact without completely phasing out." A knock at the door interrupted us. One of the newer displaced, a woman named Catherine who'd been caught in the Sydney incident, entered. "Sir, we have a situation. The witnesses are agitated about something. They're requesting immediate consultation." I stood and Ironwood followed. We walked through Witness Town, past buildings where shadows moved behind windows, where the laws of physics bent just enough to allow impossible things to coexist. The witnesses had made efforts to appear less threatening. Some had taken to wearing approximations of clothing, sheets and tarps draped over their void-like forms. It didn't really help, but the gesture was appreciated. The town center had been converted into a meeting space, dimensional stabilizers humming at each corner. 3 witnesses waited there, their forms rippling with what I'd learned to recognize as anxiety. "What's wrong?" I asked, extending my transparent hand. The lead witness, I'd started thinking of it as the ambassador, though they didn't use names, touched my hand, and information flooded through our connection. Images of their still world, but something was different. Cracks were appearing in the frozen reality, spreading like fractures in glass. And through those cracks, something else was visible. Not our world, not theirs, but a third space, chaotic, constantly shifting, filled with entities that were neither still nor moving, but something else entirely. "The balance is breaking," the ambassador communicated. "Our exodus to your world has destabilized our dimension. Without us to maintain it, the stillness is collapsing. What happens when it collapses completely? We don't know, but the entities in the chaos dimension are already trying to break through. They're drawn to the cracks, feeding on the instability." I pulled my hand back, shaken. "How long do we have?" "Weeks, perhaps days. When our world finally shatters, the explosion will ripple through all connected dimensions, including yours." Ironwood had been watching the silent exchange. "What did it show you?" I explained quickly, watching his expression shift from confusion to alarm. "We need to evacuate the remaining witnesses," he said immediately. "Get them all over here before their world collapses." "It's not that simple," I said. "There are millions of them. We've only prepared sanctuary for thousands. Then we prepare more. In days? Impossible." The ambassador moved closer, its form solidifying slightly in apparent urgency. There is another option. We can seal our world, prevent the collapse, but it requires anchors on both sides, permanent anchors. I understood immediately what it meant. Displaced humans on their side, witnesses on ours, living seals between dimensions. How many? Ironwood asked. 13, the ambassador said through me. 13 on each side. The number has power across dimensions. 13 displaced humans volunteering to spend eternity in a frozen world. 13 witnesses accepting permanent exile in ours. It was a lot to ask. I'll be one of them, I said immediately. Algernon, no, Ironwood started. Look at me, I interrupted, gesturing to my increasingly transparent form. I'm already more there than here. At least this way, my displacement serves a purpose. The call went out that night. We needed 12 more displaced volunteers, people willing to cross over permanently to hold the still dimension together. The response was surprising. We had 30 volunteers within hours. Sarah, whose phasing leg had spread to her entire lower body, volunteered immediately. I'm tired of not knowing which world I'll wake up in, she said. At least this way, I'll know I'm where I need to be. Dutch, who could see through walls but never what was right in front of him, signed up. Maybe in a world where nothing moves, I can finally focus. Phoenix, the teenager who existed in multiple places, offered all her versions. We count as one or many? She asked with her characteristic humor. Dr. Thornfield tried to talk us out of it, presenting alternative theories, technological solutions, anything to avoid losing 13 people to dimensional exile. But deep down, she knew what we knew. This was the only way. The ritual, for lack of a better word, took place 3 days later. The dimensional rift in Witness Town was widened carefully, creating a stable portal to the still world. 13 of us displaced stood on one side, 13 witnesses on the other. Once you cross, there's no coming back, Thornfield warned one last time. Your anchor will be permanent. You'll exist in that world forever. Not forever, I corrected. Just until the dimensions find a new balance. Could be years, could be centuries, could be forever, she insisted. Then forever it is. Ironwood shook my hand, careful to use my solid right side. You're the bravest fool I've ever met, Algernon Crowley. Tell them, I said, meaning everyone, the government, the public, history. Tell them what really happened here. Don't let them turn it into something classified and forgotten. I will. The crossing was surreal. As I stepped through the portal, I felt my body completing its transformation. The transparency spread until I was more ghost than flesh, existing fully in neither dimension but anchored to both. The still world was exactly as I'd seen in visions. Frozen waterfalls of architecture, solid clouds, a reality where entropy had reached its ultimate conclusion. But now I could feel it too, the absolute peace of it, the terrible beauty of a universe in perfect stasis. The other 12 displaced spread out, taking positions at points that felt right, though I couldn't explain how we knew where to go. We just did. As we settled into our positions, I felt the dimension stabilizing, the cracks beginning to seal. Through my connection to both worlds, I could see the 13 witnesses doing the same in our reality, spreading throughout Witness Town and beyond, becoming permanent fixtures in our world, just as we became permanent fixtures in theirs. The chaotic entities that had been trying to break through raged against the strengthening barriers, but they couldn't penetrate the living seals we'd become. Eventually, they retreated back to whatever nightmare dimension they inhabited. Time works differently in the still world. Minutes feel like hours, hours like years. Or maybe it's the opposite. hard to tell when nothing moves except your thoughts. I can still perceive our world through the connection, watch as Witness Town grows and evolves. More sanctuary zones are established, in Mongolia, in Siberia, in the Australian outback. The witnesses learn to control their stillness effect, some even managing to interact with humans without freezing them. Ironwood kept his promise. The true story was released, though heavily edited for public consumption. The world knows about the witnesses now, about dimensions beyond our own, about the thin barriers that separate realities. Some people are terrified. Others are fascinated. Most just add it to the list of impossible things they've had to accept in an increasingly strange world. The displaced who remained in our world became valuable intermediaries, helping establish communication between species that shouldn't be able to coexist, but somehow do. New displacement cases are rare now that the dimensions are stable, but when they occur, there's a support system in place. Dr. Thornfield visits the portal sometimes. She can't see us. We're too integrated into the still world now, but she knows we're there. She updates us on the progress, the setbacks, the small victories. A witness learning to play chess. A displaced child managing to stay in one place for a whole day. Treaties signed between nations and interdimensional refugees. The other 12 anchors and I have developed our own form of communication, thoughts moving between us like slow currents in a frozen ocean. Sarah found peace in the stillness, her constantly phasing body finally stable. Dutch can see everything clearly here, no walls to confuse his perception. Phoenix exists as one person for the first time in years, though she jokes that she misses arguing with herself. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't investigated those lights that night, if I'd written off the reports as hysteria or hoaxes. Would someone else have made the connection? Would the witnesses have found another way to communicate? Or would both our worlds have been destroyed in the clash between motion and stillness? But those are thoughts for a mind with nothing but time to think them. The truth is, I'm not unhappy here. It's peaceful in a way our world never could be. Nothing changes, nothing decays, nothing dies. We exist in a single eternal moment, holding two realities apart through will alone. And sometimes, in what passes for night in a world without time, I can feel them. All the people we saved, all the ones who didn't become frozen, who didn't get lost between dimensions. They're living their lives, moving through their world, never knowing how close they came to stillness. That's enough. That has to be enough. From my position in the still world, I can perceive the moment of my last communication with our reality. It's always there, always happening, like everything here. Agent Algernon Crowley, final report. The dimensional barriers are stable. The 13 anchors are in position. The still world is contained. The chaos dimension is locked out. And our world is safe. The witnesses are integrating successfully. The mission is complete. To anyone who reads this, remember that sometimes the greatest service isn't in the battles you win or the borders you protect, but in the bridges you become. We chose to be those bridges, to stand eternal watch between worlds that should never touch. Don't mourn us. We're not dead, not lost. We're exactly where we need to be, holding the line against a stillness that would consume everything, and a chaos that would shatter it all. And if you ever see lights in the desert that shouldn't be there, if you encounter people standing impossibly still, if reality seems to bend in ways it shouldn't, know that we're here, keeping the balance, making sure the motionless and the moving can coexist without destroying each other. This is Agent Algernon Crowley, interdimensional anchor, signing off from the space between spaces. The watch continues, the message echoes through eternity in the still world. always being spoken, always just finished, always about to begin. Like us, the 13 who chose stillness so others could keep moving. In our world, Witness Town has become a model for interdimensional cooperation. Tour groups come to see the shadows that shouldn't exist living alongside humans who shouldn't be able to perceive them. Scientists study the physics-defying reality of the sanctuary zones. Children grow up in a world where the impossible is just another fact of life. The witnesses keep their promise. No more frozen people, no more expanding still zones. They've found their balance in our world of motion, just as we found ours in their world of stillness. Agent Cassius Ironwood retired last year, but still visits Witness Town monthly. He stands at the portal sometimes, knowing I can see him even if he can't see me. He doesn't say anything, doesn't need to. His presence is message enough. We're remembered. Our sacrifice meant something. Dr. Ophelia Thornfield continues her research, working to understand the mechanics of dimensional displacement. She's developed treatments that can prevent mild cases from progressing, though nothing that can reverse what's already happened. She keeps a photo on her desk, all 13 of us anchors, taken the day before we crossed over. We look tired, translucent, caught between worlds, but we're smiling. The truth of what happened in the desert that night has become legend, conspiracy theory, and scientific fact all at once. People believe what they want to believe. But those who've seen the witnesses, who've experienced the impossible stillness, who felt reality bend around them, they know. They know that sometimes the real borders aren't between nations but between realities. That sometimes protection means sacrifice. That sometimes to save the world you have to leave it. And so we remain, 13 souls in perfect stillness, 13 shadows in constant motion, holding apart dimensions that long to collapse into each other, forever watching, forever waiting, forever keeping the balance. The motionless people aren't victims anymore. They're guardians, bridges, the thin line between order and chaos, motion and stillness, possible and impossible. And somewhere in the space between heartbeats, between thoughts, between moments, we stand eternal watch, ensuring that both worlds, all worlds, continue to exist. The watch never ends, and we wouldn't have it any other way.